I never thought I'd own my parents' dream house, especially not at 18, but life has a way of creating the most unexpected twists, doesn't it? I'm Alex Chen, and this is how I went from being kicked out on my 18th birthday to becoming the owner of a $2.8 million property that my parents desperately wanted. But let me start from the beginning, because this story isn't just about a house, it's about family, betrayal, and the sweeter side of karma. Growing up, I was always different from what my parents expected. While my younger sister Jennifer was the perfect child, captain of the cheerleading squad, straight A student, and social butterfly, I was the quiet one who spent hours in front of computers. My parents never understood my passion for coding and cryptocurrency. "Stop wasting time on that internet nonsense," my father would say, while my mother added, "Why can't you be more like your sister?" What they didn't know was that while they were pushing me to follow their traditional path, I was building something of my own. At 15, I started developing apps. Small ones at first, utility apps that helped people organize their daily lives. By 16, I had a steady income from app sales, but I kept it quiet. I knew my parents would either try to control it or dismiss it as pocket money. Then came cryptocurrency. While other kids were spending their allowances on movies and clothes, I was investing in Bitcoin and Ethereum. I studied the market obsessively, learning about blockchain technology and smart contracts. My initial investment of $2,000, saved from app sales and birthday money, grew exponentially during the crypto boom. But my parents saw none of this. To them, I was just their disappointing eldest child who wasted time on computers. They focused all their attention on Jennifer, who was 2 years younger but already planning her pre-med track at their alma mater. "Alex, you need to think about your future," my mother would lecture during dinner. "Jennifer's already got 3 college acceptance letters, and you haven't even applied anywhere." What they didn't know was that I had already secured my future. By 17, my crypto investments had multiplied several times over, and my apps were generating steady monthly income. I had opened a business account under my name with the help of my Aunt Sarah, the only family member who believed in me. Then came my 18th birthday. I expected it to be like any other day, a quiet celebration, maybe some cake, and the usual comparisons to Jennifer. Instead, it became the day everything changed. I came down to breakfast, and instead of birthday wishes, I found my parents sitting at the dining table with stern expressions. My sister wasn't there, probably still asleep, as usual. "Sit down, Alex," my father said, his voice cold. "We need to talk about your future." I sat, already knowing this wouldn't be a pleasant conversation. "You're 18 now," my mother began, her hands clasped tightly on the table, "and it's time you learned about responsibility." My father nodded. "We've decided that since you refuse to take your future seriously, you need to experience the real world. You're old enough to leave." I stared at them, not quite processing what they were saying. "What do you mean?" "We mean," my father continued, his voice rising, "that you're an adult now. We've supported your computer games long enough. It's time for you to move out and learn how life really works." "But what about college?" I asked, more out of curiosity than concern. My mother's lips tightened. "We've decided to focus our college fund on Jennifer. She has real potential, and with medical school costs." Of course, they were cutting me off to fund Jennifer's education. I should have seen it coming. "You're old enough to leave," my father finally shouted, his patience wearing thin at my lack of reaction. "Pack your things, you have until the end of the week." I didn't argue, I didn't cry, I simply nodded and went back to my room. They probably expected me to beg or promise to change, but I had something they didn't know about: financial independence. That evening, I called Aunt Sarah. She had an apartment in the city she used as a rental property, but it was currently vacant. "Stay there as long as you need," she offered. "And Alex, don't let them break you." Moving out was surprisingly easy when you'd been preparing for it subconsciously for years. I had already digitized all my important documents, and my assets were secure in accounts my parents knew nothing about. Within 3 days, I was settled into Aunt Sarah's apartment. My parents seemed almost disappointed by how smoothly I accepted their decision. They probably expected me to struggle, to come crawling back begging for help. Instead, I focused on expanding my business. The crypto market was booming, and my apps were gaining more users every day. I hired a small team to help with development and started taking on bigger projects. My parents, meanwhile, didn't check on me once during those first 3 months. Jennifer, surprisingly, was the only one who reached out. They're being totally unfair. She texted me occasionally, but you know how they are with their tough love philosophy. Then came the day that changed everything. I was having lunch with Aunt Sarah when my phone buzzed with multiple notifications, all from Jennifer. "OMG Alex, Mom and Dad are buying their dream house. You know that gorgeous Victorian on Maple Street? They're getting it. They're so excited. They're telling everyone." I smiled, knowing exactly which house she meant. The Victorian mansion on Maple Street had been my parents' dream home for years. They'd often drive by it, pointing out its features and saying, "One day, that'll be ours." What they didn't know was that it already belonged to someone else, me. You see, during those 3 months of silence, I hadn't been idle. My crypto investments had paid off enormously, and when I heard through Aunt Sarah that the Victorian was going on the market, I moved quickly, using an LLC to keep my name private. I purchased the property before it was even officially listed. The next day, I received an invitation to a family dinner, not from my parents, but from Jennifer. "They want to share some big news," she said. "Please come?" I agreed, more curious than anxious. When I arrived at our old house, my parents barely acknowledged me, but Jennifer hugged me tight. "I've missed you," she whispered. During dinner, my parents could barely contain their excitement. They waited until dessert to make their announcement. "We have wonderful news," my mother began, practically glowing. "We're moving. We've finally bought our dream home, the Victorian on Maple Street." My father added proudly, "We're in the final stages of paperwork. Soon, we'll be living in the finest house in town." I listened as they detailed their plans for renovation, how they'd decorate each room, how they'd host parties in the grand ballroom. Jennifer caught my eye, noticing my slight smile. Finally, my mother turned to me, her first direct acknowledgement all evening. "Of course, you're welcome to visit occasionally, once we're settled." That's when I decided to drop my bombshell. "Actually," I said, pulling out my phone, "you might want to check who owns the property before making any plans." My father frowned. "What are you talking about? We've already arranged everything with the real estate agent." "Just check," I insisted, sliding my phone across the table with the property records displayed. My mother grabbed the phone, and I watched as her face went from confusion to shock. My father leaned over to look, and his face turned white. There it was, in black and white. The property was owned by my LLC, and as they scrolled through the documentation, they found my name as the sole owner. This can't be right," my father stuttered. "Oh, it's right," I assured them. "I bought it 3 weeks ago, cash offer, no mortgage needed." The silence that followed was deafening. Jennifer looked between us, trying to process what was happening. My mother's hands trembled as she set down my phone. "But, how?" she finally managed to ask. "Remember all that internet nonsense I was wasting my time on?" I said calmly. "Turns out it was quite profitable. Those apps I developed? They're generating 6-figure monthly revenue. And my crypto investments? Well, let's just say I could buy that house several times over." My father's face turned red. "You're lying. There's no way you could afford." I pulled up my business accounts on my phone, showing them the numbers. "I'm not the failure you thought I was. I just succeeded in a way you couldn't understand." My mother started to cry, whether from shame or frustration, I couldn't tell. My father looked like he'd seen a ghost. "So what now?" Jennifer asked, breaking the tension. "Are you going to live there?" I shook my head. "No, I'm quite happy in my apartment, but I am looking for tenants." I looked directly at my parents. "I hear the current applicants have a history of poor judgment and mistreating their children. I'm not sure they'd qualify." My father stood up abruptly. "Now listen here." "No, you listen." I cut him off firmly. 3 months ago, you threw me out because you thought I was a disappointment. You didn't bother to ask about my life, my work, or my achievements. You were so focused on your narrow version of success that you couldn't see I'd already achieved it." My mother wiped her eyes. "We only wanted what was best for you." "No," I corrected her. "You wanted what was easiest for you to understand. And now, ironically, you need my approval to live in your dream home." The reality of the situation finally seemed to hit them. Their 18-year-old disappointment of a child now held the keys, literally and figuratively, to their dreams. "What do you want?" my father asked, his voice hollow. "I want you to understand that success doesn't always look the way you expect it to. I want you to acknowledge that your tough love was really just a lack of faith in me, and I want you to apologize, not just to me, but to every kid who's ever been dismissed because their dreams didn't fit their parents' expectations." Jennifer reached over and squeezed my hand under the table. My parents sat in stunned silence. "The house is available for rent," I continued, "at market rate, with a proper lease agreement. But first, we're going to have a long conversation about respect, support, and family." What followed was 3 hours of difficult but necessary discussion. My parents, faced with the undeniable evidence of my success, finally began to listen. They asked about my business, my investments, my plans for the future. For the first time, they saw me as an adult with valuable insights, not just their disappointing child. The weeks that followed were interesting, to say the least. My parents had to swallow their pride and apply to rent the house from me, their 18-year-old son. I insisted on proper background checks and financial verification, just like any other landlord would. They had to provide references and sign a standard lease agreement. The irony wasn't lost on anyone when they had to list their previous address and landlord experience. My father, a man who had always prided himself on being a homeowner, now had to request his own son as a reference. Jennifer found the whole situation hilarious. "It's like a reality TV show," she joked. My brother the landlord. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were moments of tension, especially when my parents realized they'd have to run any renovation plans by me first. My mother struggled with the idea that she couldn't just knock down walls or replace fixtures without my approval. "But we know what's best for the house," she argued during one particularly heated discussion. "Just like you knew what was best for me?" I responded quietly. That shut down that conversation pretty quickly. Aunt Sarah, my longtime supporter, couldn't help but enjoy the situation. "Sometimes the best lessons come in unexpected packages," she told my parents when they complained to her. "Maybe it's time to learn from the child you underestimated." The most significant change came in my parents' attitude toward alternative careers and investments. My father, who had once dismissed cryptocurrency as fake money, now asked for my advice on investment strategies. My mother, who had looked down on tech careers, started sharing articles about successful app developers with her friends. But the real transformation was in our family dynamic. The power shift forced my parents to see me as an equal, not just their child. Our conversations became more balanced, more respectful. They started asking about my opinions on matters beyond just the house. Jennifer benefited too. Our parents' rigid expectations of her began to relax. "Maybe I don't have to go to medical school," she confided in me one day. "I've always wanted to study marine biology instead." The house, which had been a symbol of my parents' dreams, became a symbol of our family's transformation. Every rental payment was a reminder of how wrong they had been about me, but also an opportunity for growth and understanding. 1 year later, I sat in what used to be my parents' dream house, now my investment property, reviewing their lease renewal application. They had been good tenants, I had to admit. Every payment was on time, they maintained the property well, and they'd learned to consult me before making any changes. My father caught me smiling as I signed the renewal. "What's so amusing?" he asked. "Just thinking about how different things were a year ago," I replied. "Remember when you thought I'd never amount to anything?" He had the grace to look embarrassed. "We were wrong," he admitted, "very wrong, and I'm sorry it took something like this to make us see it." My mother, who was arranging flowers nearby, added, "We're proud of you, Alex, not just because of your success, but because of how you handled everything. You taught us more than we ever taught you." I looked around the beautiful Victorian that had brought this change about, the house that my parents had dreamed of owning, that they now rented from their 18-year-old son. Sometimes life's greatest lessons come packaged in the most unexpected ways. "So," I said, sliding the signed renewal across the table, "same time next year?" My father picked up the lease, smiling ruefully. "Same time next year, landlord." As I left the house that evening, I couldn't help but think about how life had come full circle. The child they had kicked out for not meeting their expectations had become someone they now looked up to. The house they had dreamed of owning had become the catalyst for rebuilding our relationship. Sometimes, success isn't just about proving others wrong, it's about showing them a different way to be right. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all, it's growth, understanding, and the kind of success that changes not just your life, but the lives of those who doubted you. As for me, I'm still developing apps, still investing in crypto, and still proving that success doesn't always follow the traditional path. But now, I do it with my family's support and understanding, not in spite of their disapproval. And that Victorian on Maple Street? It's not just a house anymore, it's a reminder that dreams come true in unexpected ways, and that sometimes, the best way to help others grow is to show them exactly what they failed to see in you. The end of this story isn't really an end at all, it's a beginning, of better understanding, of stronger relationships, and of a family that learned that success comes in many forms, and sometimes, it comes with a lease agreement and a valuable lesson about judging others too quickly.
This place suits you perfectly. Huh? A doghouse? After finally arriving following a 3-hour flight and a long journey from the airport, my sister Olivia laughed and pointed to a corner of the garden. The tables are all full, but this is perfect for you, don't you think? What stood there was a log cabin-style doghouse, decorated quite lavishly. A bone-shaped sign with a dog's name carved into it hung at the entrance. My mother was laughing at this too. Feeling like garbage, I quietly whispered to myself, I'll no longer try to be loved by these people. This morning my son and I had boarded a plane to attend my sister's birthday party. We keep our living situation today. Okay? I said softly but seriously to Lucas and Tyler as they fastened their seatbelts in the back seat. Yeah, I understand, 13-year-old Lucas nodded, while 10-year-old Tyler murmured, we just need to act normal, right? A 3-hour flight, then another 40 minutes by taxi from the airport. The beautifully trimmed lawns and carefully arranged trees outside the car window cleared that this place is an upscale residential area. Within the gated community stood homes that looked like they had stepped out of architecture magazines, with my sister's house being particularly eye-catching among them. I placed a white paper bag on my knee. Inside were homemade lavender cookies and a hand-drawn card. Perhaps not suitable for a party in a mansion worth tens of millions, but they were gifts prepared with all my heart. The taxi slowly came to a stop, and the driver turned around. Is this the right place? Yes, thank you. I took a deep breath and opened the door. The strong midsummer sunlight reflected off the glamorous garden decorations, burning my eyes. White and gold balloons, chandelier-like lights, and the murmur of dressed-up people. Music played faintly in the background. As we walked along the path to the entrance, Tyler tugged at my sleeve. Mom, are you nervous? I smiled. Just a little. But it's okay. We're family after all. When I rang the bell, my mother appeared at the door. She simply said, "So you came," and directed her gaze not at me, but at the children. Then my sister Olivia appeared, perfectly dressed in a designer gown, with an ideal smile fixed on her lips. Well, you actually came. That 3-hour flight must have been exhausting. Your dress is casual. To those words that could be taken as either sarcasm or a joke, I simply nodded with a smile. I baked cookies for you all. They're lavender-flavored, I said, offering the bag. My sister pinched it with her fingertips and peered inside as if appraising it. Well, cheers rose from inside the house. Unfamiliar guests were raising their glasses and enjoying the party with smartphones in hand. Please come in, or I would say, but the living room is already full. We've prepared a special place for you all. Mom, can you show them? My mother nodded with an unnatural smile. Follow me. It's outside, but it's in the shade, so it's cool. For a moment, something just didn't feel right. But seeing the children exchanging anxious glances, I swallowed that feeling. It's okay. Let's go. At this point, I still didn't know. Outside in the garden, the green lawn stretched out under the midsummer sun. A bar counter with a tent, guests chatting with champagne in hand. Flower petals floated in the marble fountain, and jazz music played softly in the background. This way, my mother said, pointing to a corner of the garden. A small wooden structure stood slightly off to the side of the party, resembling a quaint log cabin. But at its entrance hung a bone-shaped plate with Bruno written on it. Is this? As Lucas began to speak, my mother casually opened the door. It's in the shade, and there's a nice breeze. It's a quiet, peaceful place perfect for you all. It was a doghouse. Inside was an old cushion and a bed with bite marks from stuffed toys. Metal food and water bowls sat in the corner. You're joking, right? I said in a hushed voice, and my sister Olivia appeared behind me. Sorry, but all the other seats are full, but don't worry. This suits you perfectly. The children must be used to it, right? The leftovers. My sister handed pet food dishes to my two sons, 13-year-old Lucas and 10-year-old Tyler. Inside were cold roast beef and the remains of gravy sauce clinging to the corner of the plate. Some of the guests looked over, but no one said anything. They just exchanged glances for a moment, then returned to their drinks. Tyler tugged at my sleeve, suppressing his voice. "Mom, am I supposed to eat here?" I put on a smile, but my lips were trembling. "It's okay, just for a little while. Then we'll go home." Reluctantly, I had the children sit in front of the doghouse. Lucas picked up his fork without saying anything, looking down at the paper plate. But his hand was shaking. Tyler reached for the bread but quickly put it down. "Why do we have to eat in a place like this?" I couldn't answer that question. I just placed my hands gently on their backs and closed my eyes. Music and laughter echoed in the distance. An elegant cake stand stood in the middle of the garden, where men and women laughed together under the chandelier's glow. Olivia in her white dress behaved like the perfect hostess, while my mother watched proudly. "Mom, those people are looking at us," Lucas whispered. When I looked up, several guests were staring at us, but their gazes held neither sympathy nor righteousness, only a cold indifference, a desire not to get involved. Tyler murmured softly, "Did we do something wrong?" I held his small hand and hugged him tightly. "No, you haven't done anything wrong. You are the most wonderful boys." As I said this, I desperately held back my tears. But tears fell from Tyler's eyes, one after another. I can't take this anymore." He dropped the fork on the grass and clung to me, his small shoulders trembling. Lucas also frowned and said quietly, looking away, "Putting us in a place like this, those people aren't family." I gently stroked both their heads. I didn't know what words could heal this wound. Just watching my children hanging their heads on the cold grass, something inside my chest broke with a sound. "Let's go home," I said. Lucas looked up. "Really?" "Yes, we don't need to stay here anymore." As I stood up and was about to get our bag, I heard laughter from a distance. In the center of the garden, Olivia and my mother were talking with someone. They seemed to be enjoying themselves, as if they had already forgotten about relegating us to the doghouse. "Do you think they really meant it when they said suitable place?" Lucas murmured. I nodded quietly. "Yes. But their idea of what suits us has nothing to do with our worth." I went back to the living room to get our bag. I passed several guests on the way, but no one tried to make eye contact. No one stopped me. No one called out to me. I picked up the handbag I had left in the room and went back outside. The children were already standing. Tyler's eyes were red, but he had wiped away his tears and was facing forward. "Mom, let's get out of here. We can hold our heads high, right?" I smiled proudly. "Of course, we have nothing to be ashamed of." It happened just as we were about to walk toward the gate. My sons and I were crossing the pathway, approaching the entrance to the party venue. "Sorry I'm late." A man shouted as he rushed into the entrance carrying a large bouquet. He still held his smartphone in one hand, still on a call. His figure, showing signs of haste and sweat, rushed toward the venue. I tried to move out of the way, but it was too late. "I'm sorry." From the impact of him bumping into me without noticing, my bag fell from my hand. "Are you okay?" "I'm really sore." At that point, his movement stopped. While looking at my fallen bag, he slowly raised his face and froze as he met my eyes. "Eliza?" At that moment, I clearly saw his face too. "James?" Just then, my sister appeared from behind with my mother, her dress hem swirling. "James, we've been waiting for you, you're late." Sorry, Olivia. "I just finished work, and there was traffic from the airport." Saying this, James handed the bouquet he was holding to my sister. "Here, with the peonies you like? I'm glad I made it in time." As my sister accepted it with a smile, James glanced at me and continued speaking. I'm really surprised. I had no idea Eliza would be at this party. At those words, I felt a jolt. What? You know Eliza? Of course. In fact, it would be unusual to find someone who doesn't know her. James said this while returning his gaze to me, smiling a little sheepishly before clearly stating, I never expected to meet you in a place like this. CEO, it's been a while. James took my hand with an expression that couldn't hide his surprise and delight. At those words, my sister's eyes widened, and my mother whispered, CEO? James turned around and answered casually, I worked with Eliza once. I never expected to see her here today. Olivia's face visibly stiffened. What do you mean by worked with? James said with a puzzled look. You didn't know? She's the founder of Heritage Spice? Her YouTube channel has over 1 million subscribers, and she's now a charismatic figure in the seasoning industry. No way. Olivia gasped in disbelief. You're joking. You're from that company? James added with a bright smile. The spice set I received at last month's lecture was very popular with the restaurant chefs. I smiled awkwardly. Thank you. I never expected to meet in a place like this. Several guests who had been chatting nearby perked up their ears. A woman tilting her champagne glass whispered, Heritage, you mean that one? You're the CEO? My mother quietly asked. I took a deep breath. There was no point in hiding it anymore. Yes, I am. Tyler squeezed my hand tightly, and Lucas lifted his face and looked at me proudly. James, who had been watching us intently, suddenly turned to my sister. Olivia, you knew Eliza? My sister's face stiffened for a moment. But perhaps sensing the gazes around her, she reluctantly answered, She's my sister. James's eyes widened. Your sister? This is the first time I've heard you have a sister. It wasn't worth mentioning. My sister's voice carried a trace of bitterness. But James didn't seem satisfied with that answer. He turned his gaze back to me and said with a smile, By the way, your new product line this season is being talked about as revolutionary in the industry. I think your talent for blending spices is genuine. It's truly an honor to meet you today, as a fellow professional. Somewhat surprised by James's straightforward words, I smiled naturally. Thank you. I'm happy to hear you say that. My voice was quiet, but those words were tinged with the pride and relief of someone who had stopped hiding. At that moment, a clear murmur began to spread among the guests who had been eavesdropping. Eliza is from that Heritage? Unbelievable. To think the actual person would be in a place like this. Wait, isn't she the woman who was just at the doghouse? I could see whispers being exchanged as glances were cast in our direction, spreading like ripples throughout the entire venue. I straightened my back and gently placed my hands on the children's shoulders. We'll be leaving now. When I said this, James nodded slightly. Before you go, may I take a photo with you? I want to show it off to my staff. Tyler and Lucas looked at each other and smiled. That's great, Mom. With a small smile, I wrapped my arms around the children's shoulders. Of course. It would be my honor, I replied. He took out his smartphone and stood beside us with a natural smile. In front of the camera, Lucas and Tyler also pressed their shoulders together and smiled brightly. The world was slowly beginning to change. Excuse me, may I have your attention for a moment? James's voice rang out clearly amid the garden's murmurs. He put his smartphone back in his pocket and slowly stepped forward. There stood the guests, still frozen as they tried to grasp the situation, along with my confused sister and mother. Since we have this opportunity, allow me to introduce someone, James said with a smile. This is Eliza, founder and CEO of Heritage Spice, and also a YouTuber with over 1 million subscribers. At that moment, the atmosphere of the party completely changed. A woman holding a champagne glass tilted it in surprise, and men sitting on sofas widened their eyes and stood up. "Excuse me, my daughter is a huge fan. Could I possibly get your autograph?" I hesitated for a moment, but then nodded gently. "Of course. Thank you." Watching this, Tyler exclaimed, "Mom, you're amazing," while Lucas proudly puffed out his chest. "She's my mom. She's really amazing." Hearing this, another guest approached shyly. "I always watch your YouTube, and your bento recipes are super helpful." From behind them, a middle-aged man called out, "My wife is a huge fan. She watches your videos every day and always says her videos make cooking enjoyable." Then a young woman, clutching her smartphone, said with a smile, "I'm looking forward to your next Sweets episode." Everyone at my workplace shares and watches them together. Before I knew it, people had begun to gather around me, one by one. People who knew my content, not just my name. I responded politely and carefully to each person, as if it were perfectly natural for me to be standing there. But my sister's and mother's expressions began to change visibly. "I never heard about this. Not at all. You never said a word about any of this," my sister whispered in a trembling voice. My mother stood speechless with shock. I looked them straight in the eyes. There was no anger or hatred in my gaze. Only a quiet determination resided there. "Do you think you would have believed me if I had told you?" My mother couldn't answer. Her mouth remained open as her eyes darted around. "You've always looked down on me. When I said I loved cooking, you laughed and said, 'At least you're good at housework.' When I got divorced, you treated it like proof of a failed life, and assumed that not being a full-time employee meant I was unstable and pitiful. I thought you invited me for your birthday, but you led us to a doghouse. That's because you truly believed that's what suits me, right?" Each word was infused with accumulated pain. "You just didn't want to accept that even a divorced single mother can create a life to be proud of with enough effort. Because if I were happy, it would destroy the meaning of everything you've done." I looked at my mother and sister once more. For the first time, their expressions showed genuine distress. As I looked at my mother and sister once more, James, who had been silently listening to this exchange from a short distance away, gently added, "When I first encountered Eliza's products, I felt not just the visual beauty, but a conviction behind the flavors. I had always wanted to know who created them." James continued as he slowly approached us. "Today, hearing your words, I understand clearly where that passion comes from." His words were quiet, but each one was straightforward and made the air tremble. And then, looking not at me but at my sister and mother, he said, "Olivia, if you had truly seen her instead of looking down on her, you could have noticed before anyone else. Eliza hasn't merely succeeded. She was repeatedly ignored and looked down upon, yet she never gave up and believed in herself, and as a result, built her current position." Hearing his words, I felt a quiet warmth ignite deep in my chest. The comfort and warmth of knowing that someone had been watching quietly seeped into my heart. "Stop it!" My sister cried out with a voice like a scream. "Everyone's being deceived. This person, she's been hiding it from us all along." James firmly replied, "She wasn't hiding it. You all just never let her speak, did you?" Silence fell. It was broken by Lucas's words. "Mom has been working hard for us ever since she separated from Dad." His voice was quiet but had a firm core. From early morning until late at night, she filmed videos, edited them, and made test batches of seasonings over and over. Despite all that, she still made lunches for me and Tyler. Even though it was tough, she was always smiling. I saw it all clearly. Tyler also nodded slightly beside him. "I love you, Mom." At their words, I felt a warmth deep in my chest. More than any applause or praise, those words from my children were the most important validation for me. Unable to hold back, I gently pulled Lucas and Tyler close and embraced them tightly. Thank you, Mom is truly happy to have you both. Several guests who had been watching this scene slowly but surely began to applaud. Eventually it spread, expanding throughout the center of the party, as if celebrating a new guest of honor. Eliza, do you have plans for a recipe book? I'll definitely buy it. Looking forward to seeing your next video. Among the guests laughing and saying such things, there was no longer a place for my sister and mother. I quietly said, "Thank you, but we'll be taking our leave now." Several guests looked disappointed, but no one tried to stop us. After experiencing her dignity, they understood this was only natural. I headed toward the gate with my children. I took one last look at the venue. We have a place to return to. Saying this, I took Lucas and Tyler's hands and left the venue. In the blazing afternoon sun, there was no hesitation or pain in my back. Only quiet pride and certain hope. This incident was quickly spread and became a topic on social media the following day. Posts about the woman in the doghouse was actually the CEO of a famous seasoning brand went viral, with videos and photos being shared one after another. Many warm messages were sent to me. Because of this, I began to receive far more attention than I had ever imagined. Publishing contract offers and speaking requests from companies and schools came one after another, and my days became busier than ever before. My sister and mother must have been at a loss for words upon discovering that the family failure they had looked down on was actually receiving great trust and recognition from the public. However, this wasn't a case of me gaining attention because I was once degraded. I felt that my worth had been there all along from the beginning. It had simply, at last, come to the world's attention. 3 months later, we moved to a new home. It was a modern, open house standing on a small hill in the suburbs. From the glass-walled living room, you could see the spacious garden and the lush forest beyond it. The large dining table was filled with an array of colorful dishes. It was a carefully prepared homemade menu, including prototypes for my newly launched second brand, Root Flame. "Mom, these pickles are so delicious," Tyler shouted with his cheeks full, while Lucas poured sparkling water instead of wine into his glass and smiled. "Can I lead the toast?" Just then, a smartphone rang. The screen displayed my aunt's name. "Eliza? Do you have a moment?" "Oh, yes. What is it?" A voice from the other end of the phone was mixed with a sigh. "I got a call from your sister the other day. She said she couldn't get in touch with you." I didn't say anything, holding my phone tighter in my hand. "She asked me if I could somehow contact you. She's been saying she wants to talk when the time is right, but I'm sure she doesn't know what to say anymore." I exhaled briefly. "There's nothing left to talk about." "Don't say that. Your sister seems to be regretting a lot of things now." "It seems Olivia's engagement with James was broken off too. Can't you somehow start over as a family? Their regret is their own problem. For me, that day was the last. I can't imagine wanting to be family after being treated like that." On the other end of the phone, my aunt fell silent, as if at a loss for words. I continued quietly. "I finally found my place. So I don't plan to go back. Rather than clinging to the past, I want to live with people who truly value me." "I see. That makes sense. I can't force you. I'm sorry." I lowered my eyes slightly. After a moment of silence, my aunt said in a somewhat softer voice, "But you know, Eliza, the world is surprisingly fair. People who are watching really see. So hold your head high." I smiled slightly. "Thank you. Don't worry. I won't shrink away anymore, no matter what happens." With that, I hung up the phone. When I turned around, Lucas and Tyler were running around in the garden, laughing with water guns in their hands. Looking at that casual scene, I quietly thought, this moment right here is the most precious and truly happy. About a year later, a letter arrived in the mailbox. On the back were written the names of my sister and mother. I took it, silently threw it in the trash without opening the seal, without surprise or hesitation. I'm no longer weak enough to be swayed by words written there. That night, laughter filled the dining room of our home. As Lucas and Tyler blew out the candles on the homemade chocolate cake, I smiled amid loud applause. James stood in the kitchen, putting the finishing touches on a special herb roast for me. After breaking off his engagement with Olivia, he became an advisor for my brand, and we met many times during photo shoots and product development. His sincere approach to cooking and his honest attitude at all times gradually allowed me to open my heart. While building trust as business partners, a natural bond began to form between us. It wasn't about competing or taking from each other, but about building something together. It was completely different from what I once knew as family. Warm lighting and the presence of people with whom I could truly feel at ease. That was my family now. Once I was obsessed with blood ties and desperately wanted to be loved. No matter how coldly I was treated, I convinced myself it was because there was something lacking in me. But now I can clearly say, my mistake was entrusting my worth to others' evaluations. In this past year, I've clearly learned. Instead of trying to gain the love of people who don't accept you, if you create your own place, the right people will come. When I chose and built that place, relationships full of trust and respect naturally gathered around me. Now I have a space where I can be myself without having to flatter anyone or fear rejection. I leaned back on the sofa, listening to the children's laughter, and quietly closed my eyes. I no longer need to live to meet someone else's expectations. I live my life. And that is not something given by someone else, but something I choose with my own hands. I suddenly remembered myself from a year ago. That day when I endured humiliation in front of my children at the doghouse. But without that day, I wouldn't have come this far. It was a life built by my own hands, filled with pride and dignity. Then Lucas said to me, "Hey Mom, I think I might actually like that day when we were in the doghouse, just a little bit." I looked at him in surprise. Why? Because without that day, I don't think we would have become this strong. I looked at my son and slowly nodded. Yes, that day wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. My story is no longer about being leftovers. The live stream to Grandpa Edward began with a view of my empty hands before it shifted to my bedroom door. Sweet 16 reveal, coming soon. I murmured into my phone, struggling to contain my thrill. Ready for this, Grandpa? His chuckle, a bit staticky through my earbuds, responded. As ready as can be, sweetheart. I pushed the door open, already picturing where I'd set up the new art supplies he'd promised. But the words caught in my throat. Where my easel should have been, a spotless white crib stood bathed in the afternoon sun. My posters, my paintings, my entire teenage life had been wiped away. Pale yellow ducks pranced across freshly painted walls. Mom. My voice was weaker than intended. Dad. Their voices drifted up from downstairs, likely from Dad's study. My feet felt like lead as I went down, still broadcasting. The study door was slightly ajar, letting snippets of their conversation reach me. Lena will understand eventually. Eleanor, maybe we should have. Should have waited until she got home from school, given her time to have one of her dramatic outbursts. I pushed the door wide open. Mom stood by the window in her sharp blazer, while Dad was slumped in his leather chair, his gaze avoiding mine. What happened to my room? I asked, though I already knew the nursery theme, the timing. It had to be for Sophia's baby. Mom's lips tightened into that familiar line of disapproval. Good. We need to discuss some changes. Changes. The word tasted bitter. You mean how you turned my bedroom into a nursery without even telling me? Your sister needs that space more than you do right now. Mom stated, as if explaining something obvious to a child. We've arranged for you to stay with Aunt Clara. Dad mumbled, shifting in his chair. It's just temporary, honey, until we figure something out. Figure something out? I gripped my phone tighter, suddenly grateful for Grandpa's silent presence on the other end. I live here. This is my home. Was your home? Mom corrected sharply. Honestly, Lena, you're 16 now. It's time to stop being so self-absorbed. Your sister is starting a family. She needs our support. The room swam slightly. And what about what I need? What you need. Mom's voice turned icy. Is to grow up and stop making everything about yourself. Clara's expecting you tonight. I've already packed your essentials. I looked at Dad, but he just stared at his hands, shoulders hunched as if trying to disappear into his chair. Sweet 16. Happy birthday to me, I guess? I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. Thanks for the heads up. Don't be dramatic, Lena. Mom sighed. Your aunt's place is perfectly nice, and it's closer to your school. This is hardly the tragedy you're making it out to be. I backed toward the door, my hand finding the doorknob. You're right, Mom, it's not a tragedy. It's just really clear where I stand with you both. As I turned to leave, I saw Dad flinch, a slight tremor in his hand, as he reached for his coffee cup. Mom's reflection in the window showed a flicker across her face. Not guilt, exactly, but something akin to unease. I ended the live stream as I went upstairs, but not before whispering, "Did you get all that, Grandpa?" His response was instant and grim. Every word, sweetheart, every single word. Standing in what used to be my room, I ran my fingers along the crib's smooth white rail. The nursery was beautiful, truly perfect for the golden child's perfect baby. But as I traced one of those cheerful yellow ducks, I made a silent promise. This was not going to be the end of my story, not by a long shot. Clara's spare room smelled faintly of lavender and fresh paint. She'd stayed up late helping me hang fairy lights across the ceiling, turning the plain walls into something almost magical. But at 3 a.m., even magic couldn't quiet my racing thoughts. My phone buzzed. A text from Sophia. "Mom says you're being difficult about the nursery. Can't you think of someone else for once?" I switched off my phone and padded downstairs, drawn by the sound of clinking dishes. Clara stood at the kitchen counter, her dark hair tousled from sleep, stirring something in a pot. Couldn't sleep either. She asked without turning around. "How did you know it was me?" "Because you walk exactly like your mother used to, before she started wearing those ridiculous heels everywhere." She poured hot chocolate into 2 mugs, adding a generous handful of mini marshmallows to mine. "Want to talk about it?" I wrapped my hands around the warm mug. "Did you know about their plans for my room?" "No." Her voice held a sharp edge I hadn't heard before. "Eleanor called me yesterday morning, informed me you'd be staying here, as if I were some kind of hotel service. You could have said no. And leave you where? With them." She sat opposite me, her eyes sharp in the dim kitchen light. "Do you remember your 10th birthday?" I stared into my hot chocolate. "The art show? The one you spent weeks preparing for, those paintings? Your teacher even called to say how talented you were." She paused, stirring her drink. "Your mother scheduled a client dinner for the same evening. Your father promised he'd come see your work afterwards, but he fell asleep in his study instead." The memory still stung. "Mom said I shouldn't have expected them to rearrange their lives for a school art show. You stopped painting after that." "Yeah, well, what was the point?" The marshmallows in my cocoa had melted into a sweet, sticky swirl. "Mom always said art wouldn't pay the bills." Clara's phone chimed, her expression clouding over, as she glanced at it. "Speaking of your mother, what now?" "She wants me to send you home this weekend for a family dinner. Sophia is officially announcing her pregnancy." She looked up at me. "You don't have to go." "Yes, I do." I traced the rim of my mug. "If I don't, they'll say I'm being selfish again, making everything about me, just like they made my birthday about Sophia." Clara's voice was gentle, but her words struck home. My phone buzzed again upstairs, probably another text from Sophia. I thought about my sister's seemingly perfect life. Her successful husband, Her growing family, our parents' constant approval. But I'd also seen the cracks in her smile at family gatherings, the way her hands trembled when Mom criticized her weight or career choices. "You know what's funny?" I said, breaking the silence. "When I was little, I used to think Sophia hung the moon. She'd sneak into my room after Mom and Dad's parties, tell me stories about her college adventures. Then she met Richard, and suddenly it was like she became Mom's mini-me." Clara reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "People change, sweetheart. Sometimes not for the better." "Yeah." I squeezed back, then stood up. "I should try to sleep. Big family dinner to prepare for, right?" "Lena," Clara called as I reached the stairs, "whatever you're planning. And don't tell me you're not planning something. Just remember that revenge might feel good for a moment, but it won't fix what's broken." I paused, thinking about the live stream Grandpa had witnessed, Dad's averted gaze, all the birthdays and art shows and moments that had slipped away. "Maybe not," I said quietly, "but pretending everything's fine isn't good either." Grandpa Edward's Mercedes rolled into Aunt Clara's driveway exactly 3 days after the birthday incident. I watched from the window as he emerged, his usual sharp suit replaced by casual slacks and a sweater. He looked older, somehow tired in a way I'd never seen before. "You didn't have to come," I said when he stepped inside, though my tight hug probably betrayed how relieved I was to see him. "Actually, I did," he replied, placing a leather briefcase on Clara's coffee table. "Especially after what I witnessed on that live stream." Clara appeared with coffee, her expression guarded. "Eleanor called this morning. She's not happy about you being here." "Eleanor hasn't been happy about anything since she married that spineless." He caught himself, glancing at me. "Sorry, sweetheart, but we need to discuss something important." He pulled several documents from his briefcase. I recognized the Whitman Industries letterhead. "Your mother's been pressuring me to sign over control of the company," he said, spreading the papers across the table. "She claims it's about succession planning, but the timing is interesting, isn't it? The same week they kick you out." I picked up one of the documents, scanning the legal jargon I barely understood. "The same week they assume I won't find out about their treatment of you." His voice hardened. "They forgot about our weekly video calls, didn't they?" Clara leaned forward. "What are you planning?" Before he could answer, my phone buzzed. Mom's face flashed on the screen. I showed it to them, and Grandpa nodded. "Put it on speaker." "Lena," Mom's voice filled the room. "Your father and I expect you at dinner tonight. No excuses." "I'm studying." "Isn't going to work." "Your sister's announcement dinner is important to this family, and since you're still part of this family, despite your recent attitude, you will attend." I saw Grandpa's slight nod. "Fine, I'll be there. And wear something appropriate, not those dreadful ripped jeans." The line went dead. "Still part of the family," I echoed, a bitter laugh escaping me. "Funny how that works when they need something." Grandpa tapped the papers. "They need more than you know. The company's facing some challenges, nothing serious yet, but enough to make your mother nervous about her position, and Sophia's baby. That's their backup plan. The perfect family image," Clara murmured. "The successful daughter, the precious grandchild, the disposable teenager," I added. Grandpa's expression darkened. "You were never disposable, Lena, and it's time your parents remembered that." He pulled out another document. "This is my current will. I'm making some changes." "Dad," Clara warned, "don't do anything rash. Rash would be letting them continue this behavior." He turned to me. "I'll be attending tonight's dinner too. Uninvited." My stomach twisted. "They'll blame me." "Let them." He squeezed my hand. "Sometimes the kindest thing we can do for people we love is to stop enabling their worst behavior." I thought about Mom's controlling voice, Dad's constant silence, Sophia's perfect life built on perfectly crafted lies. What if it makes everything worse? Worse than being erased from your own home? Clara asked softly. Worse than being treated like an inconvenience by the people who should love you most. Grandpa gathered his papers. The question isn't whether this will make things worse, sweetheart. The question is whether you're ready to show them who you really are. Someone who won't be pushed aside or forgotten. I picked up my phone, looking at Mom's missed call notification. I guess we'll find out at dinner. Yes, he said, and for a moment I saw a flash of the shrewd businessman who'd built an empire. I suppose we will. I arrived early for Sophia's announcement dinner, slipping in through the kitchen door like I used to when I was late for curfew. Voices drifted from Dad's study. Mom's sharp tone, Dad's quieter murmur, and Sophia's familiar laugh. The company's practically ours already. Mom was saying, Dad's getting sentimental in his old age. All it takes is one grandchild, too. I edged closer to the partially open door. But what about Lena? Sophia asked. She's his favorite, everyone knows it. Lena is a child. Mom dismissed. She can't run a company. Besides, once the baby comes, Dad will forget all about her artistic phases and teenage dramatics. Eleanor, Dad's voice held a rare note of unease. Maybe we should slow down. The way we handled her birthday. The way we handled it was necessary. That girl needs to learn her place. And with the merger coming up. The merger. Sophia's voice sharpened. What merger? Richard's company, Mom said. Once we announce your pregnancy, the timing will be perfect. A merger between families, securing both companies' futures. Your father-in-law is already on board. My hand flew to my mouth. Richard was Sophia's husband, but he was also the CEO of their biggest competitor. A merger would mean, you're using my baby as a business deal. Sophia's voice cracked. I'm securing our family's future, Mom countered. Something your sister seems determined to undermine with her constant need for attention. Speaking of attention, Dad cut in. Dad's car just pulled up. I backed away from the door, but not quickly enough. It swung open, and I found myself face to face with Mom. Her perfectly applied makeup couldn't quite mask a flicker of panic. Lena? Her smile was brittle. How long have you been standing there? Long enough. The words came out firmer than I felt. So that's why you wanted the nursery done so quickly. It was never about Sophia's baby. It was about the merger. Sophia appeared behind Mom, one hand protectively over her stomach. Lena, it's not what you think. Really? Because it sounds like Mom's using your baby to manipulate Grandpa and secure a business deal. I met Mom's eyes. That's why you want me gone, isn't it? Because I might tell him the truth. You understand nothing about business. Mom snapped. About what it takes to protect this family's legacy. Protect it. I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. You mean control it, like you try to control everything else. The doorbell rang. Dad emerged from the study, adjusting his tie. That'll be your grandfather. Perfect timing, I said, watching Mom's face pale slightly. I'm sure he'd love to hear about the merger plans, about how his great-grandchild is just another business asset. You wouldn't dare, Mom hissed. I thought about my empty room upstairs, about years of missed art shows and conditional love, about Sophia's face when she realized her baby was just another piece in Mom's game. Try me, I said, turning toward the front door. Mom grabbed my arm. If you ruin this, you'll... What? Throw me out again? Too late. The doorbell rang again. Sophia's hands were trembling. Dad wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. And Mom, for the first time in my life, I saw real fear crack through her perfect facade. I pulled free of her grip and walked toward the front door, my heart pounding, but my step steady. Behind me, I heard Mom's heels clicking rapidly across the floor, rushing to beat me there. The game was about to change. I just hoped I was ready for what came next. The college brochures spread across Aunt Clara's kitchen table looked like escape routes. Art programs, photography majors, creative writing departments, everything Mom would despise, everything I might love. Berkeley has an excellent fine arts program, Clara said, sliding another pamphlet toward me. And it's about as far from here as you can get without leaving the country. My phone buzzed. Another message from Sophia. We need to talk. Alone. I'd been ignoring her texts since the dinner disaster 3 days ago, when Grandpa had stormed out after learning about the merger plans. Mom hadn't spoken to me since, but her silence spoke volumes. Lena. Clara tapped the brochures. You're miles away. Sorry, My phone buzzed again. This time a message from Richard, Sophia's husband. Meeting at the office. Important information about your mother's plans. Come alone. I have to go, I said, standing abruptly. There's something I need to handle. Clara caught my arm. Whatever you're planning, remember what happened last time you tried to face them alone. This is different. I showed her Richard's message. He might have proof about the merger, something we can show Grandpa. Or it could be a trap. She frowned. At least let me drive you. They'll recognize your car. I'll take the bus. I grabbed my jacket. Besides, I'm tired of hiding. The corporate office loomed ahead 30 minutes later, all glass and steel and secrets. The security guard barely glanced at my student ID before waving me through. Richard's office was on the top floor, with a view of the city that probably cost more than my college fund, if I even had one anymore. The elevator doors opened to reveal not Richard, but Mom. I knew you'd come, she said, stepping inside before I could retreat. So predictable. The doors closed, and we began to ascend. Where's Richard? At home with your sister, who, by the way, is absolutely devastated by your betrayal. She jabbed the emergency stop button, and the elevator lurched to a halt. We need to talk about your future. My future. I laughed humorlessly. You mean the one you're trying to control, like everything else. I'm trying to protect this family's legacy, something you seem determined to destroy. She pulled out an envelope. Inside is an acceptance letter to a Swiss boarding school. Very exclusive, very far away. My throat tightened. You can't force me to go. No? Think about Sophia. The stress you're causing could harm her baby. Think about your father. His position in the company depends on this merger. She held out the envelope. One signature, and you get a fresh start. Isn't that what you want? The elevator felt smaller by the second. What I want is a mother who actually cares about me, not just her precious company. Don't be dramatic. This is a generous offer. Take it before I change my mind. I looked at the envelope, then at her perfectly composed face. You know what's funny? I used to think Sophia was the lucky one. Your perfect daughter, your pride and joy. But she's just as trapped as I am, isn't she? Something flickered in Mom's eyes. Fear, recognition. Before she could respond, my phone chimed. A message from Grandpa. Don't sign anything. On my way. Mom saw the text, her grip tightening on the envelope. Time to choose, Lena. Your family's stability or your selfish desires. What's it going to be? The elevator hummed around us, suspended between floors, as if my answer hung in the balance. I thought about the college brochures, about Sophia's shaking hands, about years of trying to earn love that should have been unconditional. I reached for the envelope. I took the envelope from Mom's hand and ripped it in half. The sound echoed in the elevator like a gunshot. That was a mistake, she said, her voice suddenly deadly quiet. The elevator lurched back to life, ascending to the top floor. When the doors opened, I found Dad and Richard waiting, along with 2 security guards. I tried to give you an easy way out, Mom said, stepping past me. Now, we do this the hard way. Richard held up a document. Sign this and we forget the scene you caused at dinner. Your grandfather never learns about your little outburst. What outburst? I looked from him to Mom. The truth. About how you're using Sophia's baby to manipulate him. The truth. Dad finally said something. is that you've become unstable, dangerous to this family's reputation. Dangerous. I laughed, but it came out shaky, because I won't play along with your games anymore. Mom nodded to the security guards. Show her. One guard produced a tablet, playing a video of me at the dinner. But something was wrong. The footage had been edited, making me look unhinged, aggressive. My words about the merger were cut out, replaced with what seemed like a jealous rant about Sophia's baby. Social media is so unpredictable, Richard said smoothly. Once something goes viral, you wouldn't, I whispered, but I knew they would. Sign the papers, Lena, Mom said. Agree to the boarding school, or this video goes public. Think about what that would do to your college applications, to your future. The elevator dinged again. Grandpa emerged, followed by Aunt Clara. Relief flooded through me until I saw their faces. I saw the video, Grandpa said, his voice heavy with disappointment. Lena, how could you? What? No, it's fake. I tried to explain. Clara cut in, her eyes pleading with me to understand. But the footage. Mom stepped forward, all concern and maternal worry. We've been trying to handle this privately, Dad. Lena's been struggling since we announced Sophia's pregnancy. The therapist suggested a change of environment might help. I'm not struggling. But my voice cracked, making me sound exactly like the unstable teenager they'd portrayed. They edited that video. They're trying to force me out because I know about the merger. Merger? Richard laughed. What merger, Mr. Whitman? I assure you, there's no merger. Just a troubled girl who needs help. I turned to Grandpa, desperate. You know me. You know I wouldn't. I know you've been under a lot of stress, he said gently. Maybe your mother's right. Some time away. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. Even Grandpa believed their lies. Even he was willing to send me away. The papers. Mom pressed, holding out a pen. Sign them, and we handle this as a family. Refuse and the video goes public. I looked at each face in turn. Dad avoiding my eyes as usual, Richard smug and certain of victory, Clara torn between loyalty and the evidence before her, Grandpa, his faith in me shattered by their careful manipulation, and Mom, finally showing real emotion. Triumph. My hand shook as I took the pen. The document was filled with legal terms, but one phrase stood out. Voluntary commitment to residential treatment facility. Not boarding school. A psychiatric facility. Last chance, Lena, Mom said softly. Choose wisely. My phone buzzed one last time. A message from Sophia. Don't sign anything. I have proof. Hold on. But as I looked up at the wall of faces against me, at the carefully constructed trap they'd laid, I realized something terrible. Sometimes, holding on hurts more than letting go. I pressed the pen to paper, my signature the only weapon I had left. The residential facility admission papers felt heavy in my hands. Just as I pressed the pen to paper, the office door burst open. Sophia stood there, breathless, one hand protectively over her stomach. Stop, she commanded, her voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. Nobody's signing anything. Mom stepped forward. Sophia, you shouldn't be here in your condition. My condition. Sophia laughed, sharp and bitter. You mean the condition you've been using to manipulate everyone. She pulled out her phone. I recorded everything, Mother. Your conversation with Richard about the merger, the plans to use my baby to secure Grandpa's fortune, even your instructions to the video editor about doctoring Lena's footage. The room went deathly silent. Richard's smug expression crumbled. Dad's face was drained of color. You're lying, Mom said, but her voice wavered. Am I? Sophia pressed play. Mom's voice filled the room, crystal clear. Edit out anything about the merger, make her look unstable. Once she's committed, no one will believe her anyway. Grandpa moved faster than I'd ever seen him move. He snatched the commitment papers from my hands, tearing them to shreds. Eleanor, he said, his voice shaking with rage. What have you become? Dad, I can explain. Explain what? Clara cut in. How you were willing to commit your own daughter to a psychiatric facility to protect your lies. Mom's composure finally shattered. Everything I did was to protect this family's legacy. The merger would have secured all our futures. If Lena had just stayed quiet. If I had just disappeared. I finished for her. Like I've been disappearing my whole life? Staying quiet at my birthdays, ignoring art shows, every time you chose the company over me. You ungrateful. She lunged forward, but Sophia stepped between us. Enough, Mom. I won't let you do to my child what you did to Lena. This ends now. Richard moved toward the door. This is ridiculous. I never agreed to. Sit down, Richard. Grandpa commanded. Nobody leaves until we settle this. He turned to Mom, his expression granite. You're done here, Eleanor. As of this moment, you're removed from the company board. The merger is canceled. You can't. I can, and I will. The company goes to Clara and Lena. Sophia, too, if she wants it. He looked at each of us in turn. It's time this family remembered what actually matters. Mom's face contorted. George, say something. Dad stood up slowly. For the first time in my memory, he met Mom's gaze directly. I should have said something 16 years ago. He turned to me. I'm sorry, Lena. I was a coward. A coward. Mom's laugh was hysterical. You're all cowards. Destroying everything I built. You built nothing. Sophia interrupted. You just controlled and manipulated until you got what you wanted. But you forgot something, Mom. You forgot that real family can't be bought or controlled. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and saw past the perfect exterior to the scared little girl who'd once told me bedtime stories, who'd been just as trapped as I was. The video, I said quietly. Release it. Everyone stared at me. Release the real video, I continued. Let everyone see the truth. No more hiding. Mom's face went white. You wouldn't dare. Sophia's finger hovered over her phone. Try us. In that moment, looking at Mom's crumbling facade, I realized something important. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. Sometimes it's about finally being strong enough to walk away. I took Sophia's hand. Come on, sis. Let's go home. Not to the house with its empty rooms and hollow promises, but to somewhere new, somewhere real. 6 months later, I stood in front of my easel at Berkeley's Spring Art Showcase, watching people study my piece. The painting showed a nursery, but not the perfect one Mom had designed. This one was real, with shadows in the corners, imperfect walls, and a golden light that made even the flaws beautiful. It's haunting. A voice said behind me. I turned to find Sophia, her baby daughter asleep against her shoulder. Though the yellow ducks are a nice touch. I thought about painting them white. I admitted. But some things deserve to stay bright. She smiled, adjusting the sleeping baby. Mom asked about you yesterday. I think she finally looked at the therapy pamphlets Dad gave her. And nothing. But she's trying. Maybe that's something. Grandpa and Clara appeared, arguing good-naturedly about the company's new direction. The art therapy program for at-risk teens had been my idea, but Clara had made it happen. Even Dad had started volunteering, teaching photography on weekends. Your mother's letter came, Grandpa said quietly, holding out a worn envelope. The one she wrote before you were born. I thought you should have it. I took it, feeling its weight. Did you read it? No, but I remember when she wrote it. She was different then, softer, before the company became everything. I slipped the letter into my pocket, unopened. Maybe someday I'd want to read about the mom she used to be, but not today. Today was about who I was becoming. The scholarship committee is here, Clara whispered, nodding toward a group of professors. Ready to show them your portfolio. Actually, I said. I want to show them something else first. I led them to the back of the gallery, where a larger canvas waited under a sheet. This painting had taken months, countless drafts, and more courage than I knew I had. I pulled off the sheet. The painting showed our family, but not in the perfect, posed way of old portraits. Instead, it captured real moments. Sophia reading stories to her daughter, Clara and Grandpa laughing over coffee, Dad behind his camera. Even Mom was there, distant but present, a shadow beginning to take new shape. And in the center, a teenage girl at an easel, finally visible, finally whole. "Oh, sweetheart," Clara breathed. "It's called Family Portrait Unfinished," I explained, "because we're all still working on it, aren't we?" Sophia squeezed my hand. "Always." Later, after the scholarship committee had left with an offer I couldn't refuse and the gallery had emptied, I found myself alone with my paintings. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "The new art therapy program. It's good work. You're good at this." Not an apology, not yet, but maybe, like my painting, we were all unfinished works in progress. I thought about the unopened letter in my pocket, about the mother she'd been and the one she'd become, about how sometimes the hardest part of growing up is realizing your parents are growing too, in their own imperfect ways. Another text came through, this one from Dad. "Proud of you, kiddo. Always have been." I looked at my family portrait one last time before covering it for the night. The shadows were there, but so was the light, making even the darkest corners glow with possibility, just like the nursery painting. It wasn't perfect, but maybe perfect wasn't the point. Maybe the point was learning to see beauty in the broken places, strength in the struggles, and hope in the spaces we leave blank, waiting to be filled with whatever comes next. I turned off the gallery lights and stepped into the evening, ready for my next canvas. I am Samantha. I have lived with my father since I was young. My mother passed away from illness when I was 5 years old. She was always kind, reading me picture books and hugging me tightly before sleep. However, that warmth was suddenly taken from me. After my mother's absence, our home felt too cold and quiet. For the first few years, my father was submerged in grief. Yet, he tried to recover by immersing himself in his work. After some time, he started dating occasionally but never introduced any women to me, likely out of consideration for my feelings. Despite this, we lived peacefully together. On weekends, we watched movies or had picnics in the park. Even though he was busy, my father always made sure to bake a cake for my birthday and attended my school events whenever possible. However, around the time I turned 14 years old, my father was promoted and his job became even busier. He started traveling more, only being home about 5 days a month. I spent a lot of time alone, but I kept telling myself that Dad is working hard. Even though I felt lonely, I believed our relationship was still one of mutual support. But I was mistaken. One day, he suddenly announced, "We're going to have a new family. Samantha, this is Elizabeth. She's going to be my wife." The woman he introduced wore sophisticated clothes and had a refined smile. Her blonde hair was neatly styled to her shoulders, and she extended her hand gracefully. "Nice to meet you, Samantha. I'm happy to become your new mother." At that moment, a chill ran down my spine. Her smile was too perfect, almost artificial. Furthermore, Elizabeth had 2 children, 18-year-old Anthony and 16-year-old Christina. Though they were close to my age, they seemed like complete strangers to me. "Let's get along as a family," Elizabeth said, but a sense of unease spread within me. As soon as Elizabeth and her children moved in, the atmosphere changed. Initially, Elizabeth acted kindly, smiling and saying, "Let's get along, Samantha." However, when my father left for his first business trip, her attitude shifted. "Samantha, you're part of the family, so you'll help around the house, right?" Feeling a sense of discomfort with those words, I nodded and said, "Yes." Helping out with chores was fine. But soon, it was clear that helping meant doing everything. I made breakfast, washed dishes, cleaned, and did laundry. Elizabeth drank coffee in the living room elegantly. Christina was busy with her smartphone, and Anthony was immersed in his games. One day I asked, "Hey Christina, aren't you going to help too?" At that, Christina laughed dismissively. "What? Why should I? You do it." "I'm busy with a photo shoot for my social media." Anthony snorted. "That's a woman's job." Elizabeth just sipped her coffee, looking pleased. When my father returned from his trip, Elizabeth began her performance. "Welcome back, Douglas. I've been taking care of everything at home." "It's tough, but I can manage the family." I was dumbfounded. I had done everything, yet Elizabeth acted as if she was the one struggling. My father thanked her. "Thank you, Elizabeth," and turned to me with a smile. "Is Samantha helping a bit?" "Yes." I swallowed my words. Arguing seemed pointless without evidence, and my father might not believe me. Thus began my days of hell. Elizabeth's dominance escalated daily, but I couldn't ask for help from anyone. If I talked back, I was scolded for being impudent, and the punishments grew harsher. After school, I was immediately put to work. I had no time to play with friends or even study. I had to endure. Elizabeth's demands became more severe, and my burden exceeded its limits. Something had to be done. I made a decision and reported to Child Protective Services. When an investigator came and questioned Elizabeth, she cried profusely. "That's not true. I love Samantha like my own daughter. I'm doing everything for her, but she's misunderstanding." Her theatrical voice sent shivers down my spine. However, the investigator couldn't make any conclusion immediately. Days later, the results were communicated. There are issues within the home, but it cannot be labeled as abuse definitively, so only guidance will be provided. I was shocked. Despite all I had endured, nothing would change? Elizabeth sneered. "To do such a thing, what a terrible child," and since then, her treatment of me worsened. I became isolated in this house and lost any escape. But I swore to myself, one day, I will definitely turn this situation around. Until that day came, all I could do was endure. My 18th birthday should have been a special day. But reality was different. My father was away on a business trip. Of course, I had received a message from him in advance, apologizing for not being able to be home on my birthday. However, the words that followed chilled my heart. "Enjoy a wonderful dinner with Elizabeth and the others." Dinner? For a moment, I didn't understand what was being referred to. Then, the meaning quickly became clear. Elizabeth had lied to my father, claiming, "We are celebrating Samantha's birthday at a famous restaurant in grand style." Of course, there had been no such plans. Like any other day, I came home from school and started preparing dinner. Christina was in the bathroom, as usual, filming videos for her social media. She had many followers and claimed, "I'm going to be an influencer in the future." Anthony, despite having graduated from college, did not work and spent all his time gaming in his room. Elizabeth was drinking wine in the living room. Gathering my courage, I said, "Hey, it's my birthday today." Elizabeth replied with a cool expression, "Oh, that's right. But you're an adult now, so there's no need for special treatment, right?" Christina giggled and added, "Exactly, you're 18 years old now. Why not celebrate by yourself?" I felt anger but held it in and continued making dinner quietly. As we finished eating, the doorbell rang. A package had arrived. It was from my father. When I opened it, there was a beautifully wrapped box and a letter inside. "To Samantha, happy 18th birthday. I am proud of how you always work hard. With love, Dad." As I read the letter, tears nearly spilled from my eyes. However, Elizabeth's cold voice came from behind. "What's that?" "Let me see." She snatched the letter from my hands, glanced at it, and scoffed. "Ah, Douglas does love this kind of thing. Proud of how hard you work. What exactly is she working hard at? Elizabeth, give it back. When I reached out, Elizabeth deliberately threw the letter onto the sofa. Well, you should be grateful. But things are going to change now. What do you mean? I watched her warily. Elizabeth took a sip of her wine and smirked. You're 18 years old now, right? That means you're an adult. So what? As an adult, it's normal to pay your own rent, isn't it? I couldn't believe my ears. Pay my own rent? That's right. From now on, you'll be paying $1,000 a month. Christina and Anthony chuckled. Well, it makes sense. You can't expect to live here for free forever. But it's only $1,000, so you should be grateful, Anthony added. I was beyond angry. What about Christina and Anthony? What about them? Do they pay rent too? Elizabeth shrugged dismissively. Don't be silly, Samantha. They're family, so they don't need to. Aren't I family too? Elizabeth smirked. You're not my real daughter. At that moment, something inside me snapped. I silently returned to my room and opened a drawer in my desk. Inside was an important property deed. It clearly stated that the house was in my name. My mother had left it for me. The owner of the house was neither Elizabeth nor even my father, but me. The next morning, I consulted a lawyer. Then he calmly said, "The house is in your name. That means you have the right to charge for rent from anyone living here." That's right. Conversely, Elizabeth and her children cannot live here without your permission. If they don't pay rent, they can be treated as squatters. I see. I smiled slowly. That night, in the living room with Elizabeth and the others, I quietly said, "I don't think I should be the one paying rent. You should be," I suggested. What? Elizabeth looked shocked. This house is in my name. If you want to keep living here, you should be the ones paying rent, I explained. Samantha, you're kidding, right? Christina exclaimed in panic. Anthony tried to say something but was at a loss for words. If you don't pay, you'll need to leave, I stated firmly. You're joking? Elizabeth screamed. But I was done holding back. Elizabeth, you said it yourself, didn't you? It's normal for adults to pay rent, I reminded her. Elizabeth's face turned red with anger as she yelled. Douglas would never allow this. I responded calmly. Then why don't you call Dad and check with him? Elizabeth was left speechless. Silence took over the living room. My counterattack had finally begun. The next morning, I received a call from my father. Samantha, can you talk right now? Yes, Dad. What's going on? Elizabeth called me. She said you told them they had to pay rent. Is that true? I took a deep breath and answered quietly. Yes, it's true. My father sounded puzzled. I could hear a small sigh from the other end of the phone. Samantha, can't you reconsider? They are upset because it was so sudden. I closed my eyes quietly. Reconsider? Would someone who truly understood what I had been through say that? Dad, can I ask you something? What is it, Samantha? Do you know what kind of treatment I've been receiving from Elizabeth and her kids all this time? Huh? While you were away on business trips, I was always the one stuck with the household chores. Elizabeth didn't do anything, but when you came back, she'd act like she'd done everything. Is that true? That's not all. Even when I reported to Child Protective Services, it ended with just a warning because there wasn't enough evidence. You didn't know, but I've been fighting this alone. Samantha, that's... And yet, the moment I turned 18 years old, she said, "You're an adult now, so you should pay rent. Anthony and Christina are family, but you're not my real daughter." My father was silent for a while. I knew that it was necessary for him to face the realities he had failed to see. Eventually, he said slowly, "I'm sorry, Samantha. I didn't know anything, and you didn't try to know." My father had nothing to say in return. I can't forgive Elizabeth and her kids. So, they need to leave, I stated firmly. Understood, Samantha. His voice was a bit shaky. When the call ended, I stared at the ceiling, holding my phone tightly. But it wasn't over yet. I wouldn't let my guard down until Elizabeth and her kids were out of this house. That night, I faced Elizabeth and her children in the living room. Everybody, I've made a decision. Elizabeth crossed her arms and glared at me coldly. Christina sat with a sullen look, crossing her legs, while Anthony was busy with his smartphone as usual. The house is in my name. If you want to stay, pay rent. But if you don't pay, you'll need to leave. Elizabeth scoffed. Samantha, you're joking, right? You're still a child and you say that. I'm an adult, right? Didn't you say that yourself? Elizabeth's expression stiffened. I've decided. You have 30 days to leave. Christina stood up abruptly, kicking the chair. What? Who do you think you are? This is Dad's house. No, it's my house. That's a lie. Elizabeth raised her voice. But I had already prepared the documents and placed them on the table. Here the property deed. Feel free to check it. Elizabeth's complexion changed instantly. What? I can no longer forgive how you've treated me like a maid. So, you need to leave this house. Elizabeth said with a trembling voice. Don't mess with me. A child like you doesn't have the right to decide something like this. The law seems to think otherwise. As I recalled the advice from my lawyer, I calmly informed them. If you don't vacate within 30 days, I can sue you for illegal occupancy. Anthony, still clutching his smartphone, muttered. Seriously? Christina looked incredulous. I'll tell Dad. Elizabeth shouted. I already spoke to him. I replied calmly. What did he say? He said he understood, I said. Elizabeth's face turned pale. No, this can't be. Christina stood up, yelling. This is ridiculous. Kicked out by a kid like this. It's not ridiculous. I've made this decision, I stated. I stood up, gathered the documents, and added just one more thing. Pack your things within 30 days. I then left the living room. Behind me, I could hear Elizabeth's shouts and Christina's cries, but it didn't matter anymore. This is my house. Days passed since I notified Elizabeth and her children about the eviction. They were clearly panicking but seemed to have no real intention of leaving. Christina and Anthony remained defiant, and Elizabeth was obviously scheming to corner me somehow. Then, finally, my father returned from his business trip. The moment I heard the front door open, I headed to the living room. Douglas! Elizabeth cried out, throwing herself at him in a scene that seemed straight out of a movie. Honey, you have to understand. Samantha suddenly started saying crazy things, trying to kick us out. Where are we supposed to go? She's confused. Please, say something to her. Elizabeth's performance was perfect. Crying desperately, she played the part of the unjustly ousted, pitiful stepmother. However, I wasn't going to be deceived. Neither was my father anymore. He gently peeled Elizabeth off him and said with a cold look, Elizabeth, stop the act. What, honey? Elizabeth froze. I contacted Child Protective Services, he continued. At those words, Elizabeth froze. The CPS? She repeated in a trembling voice. I had them verify what kind of treatment you were giving Samantha while I was away, how you've been treating her. His voice was stern. Honey, what are you talking about? I would never do such things. Don't lie, Elizabeth. His low voice cut her off. The CPS has records of past abuse reports from Samantha. There was no formal punishment due to insufficient evidence, but it was clear there were problems in the household. I quietly listened to their conversation, surprised yet relieved that my father hadn't just taken my word for it, He had actually checked the facts himself. But, Elizabeth broke down, her voice teary. It's a misunderstanding. Samantha was just rebelling against me, exaggerating everything. I truly considered her family. So, let me ask, he said sternly, looking down at Elizabeth. How did you spend Samantha's 18th birthday? Elizabeth stumbled over her words. Well, that is. You told me it would be celebrated grandly at a restaurant. But in reality, Samantha was making dinner. Elizabeth just opened and closed her mouth, unable to respond. I was too caught up in my work to see what was happening. But now I understand. What you've done is abuse. Elizabeth collapsed in tears. Please, Douglas, we're family, aren't we? Believe me. You said you loved me. He sighed and said emotionlessly, the person I loved wasn't lying to me. Elizabeth's face was drained of all colors. That's enough. We're getting a divorce. Christina and Anthony watched as their mother broke down. Why would you say that, Dad? Christina screamed. You're abandoning Mom? That's cruel? It's time for you two to face reality. He spoke quietly. You have always looked down on Samantha and pushed all the household chores onto her. It was wrong of me to have allowed this to go on, but I've reached my limit. Anthony stood up abruptly, kicking his chair. Don't mess with us. Where are we supposed to live now? I responded calmly. You'll have to figure that out on your own. Christina and Anthony glared at me, but their words no longer bothered me. Elizabeth was still trying to cling to Dad. Please, please. This is wrong. Don't abandon me. The one who kept deceiving me was you, he replied. With those words, he slowly left the room. Elizabeth collapsed in shock. I looked down at them and stated plainly, pack your things quickly and leave. Christina, her face turning red with anger, shouted, even if Dad abandons us, this is the only place we have. Are you going to pay the rent? I asked calmly. Christina was left speechless. If you don't pay, it will be considered illegal occupancy. At this, Elizabeth fell completely silent. There was no longer any arrogance or grace in her eyes, only the look of a defeated dog filled with despair. This was the end. I muttered that to myself as I quietly left the living room. A few days later, Dad officially filed for divorce. He proceeded quickly with the proceedings through a lawyer against Elizabeth. She was left completely clueless as she watched the family she had built up crumble before her eyes. But more damning facts came to light. It was discovered that Elizabeth had been using Dad's credit card without his permission in the past. This was considered financial exploitation and even credit card fraud, and Dad's lawyer was preparing for litigation. Receiving this news, Elizabeth was at a loss for words and ultimately lost everything. The false world she had been upholding crumbled completely, and she left the house with a stunned expression. Anthony and Christina, having lost Elizabeth's support, were at a loss for where to go. Anthony continuously moved from one friend's house to another in a nomadic lifestyle, while Christina went through a cycle of living with her boyfriend, breaking up, and then swiftly finding a new boyfriend to ensure she had a place to live. They were forced to face reality beyond the false family they had built. With the liberation from Elizabeth's toxic influence, a sense of subtle relief began to wash over me. As those who were no longer needed departed, the house gradually returned to a state of peaceful tranquility. The noisy days seemed like a lie as the house was enveloped in a calm atmosphere. It became excruciatingly clear to me just how disruptive Elizabeth, Anthony, and Christina had been to the harmony of my world. At the same time, my father expressed his remorse repeatedly. Initially overwhelmed by an indescribable surge of anger, as time progressed, I found myself able to methodically work through my tangled emotions. Samantha, I am truly sorry for everything. I was completely oblivious to the struggles you were enduring. he earnestly apologized. Regret and frustration were evident in his words. At that moment, I was uncertain about how to react. Deep down, I still harbored feelings of resentment that I found hard to forgive. However, considering he had been manipulated by Elizabeth too, I couldn't bring myself to blame him completely in my heart. I began to think that perhaps my father was just another victim too. Accepting this was not easy, but I decided to gradually try to reconcile. Initially, I was cold towards him, but gradually his sincere demeanor moved me. I may never completely forget, but at least I chose to mend our relationship without being bound by the past, to move forward. Despite the difficulties, I managed to graduate from college. Each step held significant meaning for me. Initially consumed by problems at home, I had no room to think about my future. But after graduating and going through job hunting, I finally began to walk my own path. Then, I made a resolution. I would remodel the house. I developed a desire to make that house a truly peaceful place this time. It was the house my mother left us, where my father and I could start afresh with renewed spirits. Let's truly make this a place where our hearts can rest easy, I declared as I initiated plans for the renovation. During this period, Elizabeth and the others faced their own struggles. Following her defeat in court, Elizabeth found herself accumulating debt in an effort to manage repayments, leaving her no time to enjoy her previous luxuries like sipping elegantly on coffee or indulging in stylish attire, as she grappled with her new, harsh realities daily. Anthony was trying to find a job but was having trouble securing employment due to his past issues. He was desperately searching for job opportunities but was not progressing well. Christina, who had been thriving as an influencer on social media, faced backlash over a casual remark that went viral. Furthermore, her past actions were exposed online, garnering resentment from followers. I realized that there was no longer a need for me to concern myself with their tribulations. With each step of the house's renovation, the anxiety and anger in my heart gradually faded. The act of renewing the house felt as though it was rejuvenating me as well, and I found myself increasingly eager to see the transformation. Finally, on the day everything was completed, warm light bathed the interior, casting a glow that filled the space with tranquility and a deep sense of security. Realizing that this house is my new starting point, I take a deep breath. My name is Naomi Reynolds. I am 35 years old, and I currently reside in a peaceful suburban area of New England. I was born to an American father and a Japanese mother. My father was employed by a prominent pharmaceutical company based in Boston. He was tasked with establishing a branch office in Japan, which is where he met my mother. 30 years ago, he decided to bring both my mother and me back to the US with him. At the time, I was just 5 years old. My mother was initially bewildered by the sudden change in environment, but my father reassured her, saying, "Here, you can receive the best education." My father was dedicated to his work, and my mother, despite being in a strange land, raised me. Gradually, both my mother and I adapted to life here. After maturing in the US and completing my academic journey, I managed to secure a position at a well-known advertising agency. Even now, after having gotten married and having a child, I continue to work. We lead a comfortable life, thanks to our efforts. My husband, Gabriel, holds the position of a senior manager at a prestigious investment bank. He is an exceptional spouse who consistently prioritizes our family above all else. We are blessed with a wonderful son named Jefferson, who is currently 7 years old and energetically attends a local public elementary school as a second grader. Although he has an allergy to eggs, Jefferson is a bright and well-mannered child, earning the affection and love of everyone around him. On the surface, our family life might appear calm and uneventful. However, beneath that serene exterior lies a more complicated reality, particularly concerning my relationship with my stepmother, Keiko. Keiko is my father's second wife. I lost my real mother when I was 10 years old, and I vividly remember that time. My mother loved flowers and would take me to botanical gardens on weekends. "Naomi, what's the name of this flower?" she would ask with a smile, a voice that still echoes in my ears. I watched helplessly as her smile was ravaged by illness and she passed away abruptly. The separation was too sudden. A year after her death, my father remarried Keiko. At that time, my father was suddenly left alone to raise me, and he was desperate. Seeing him struggle to balance work and household duties, I, as a fifth grader, tried my best to be a good child. So when he announced his remarriage to Keiko, I simply responded, "Okay, I understand," despite feeling complex emotions inside. At the time, she brought along her 12-year-old son, Akira. I later learned from my father that their meeting wasn't coincidental. Keiko had majored in English literature in Japan and worked as a high school teacher before coming to study in the US. After marrying a Japanese man she met here, they divorced a few years ago, and her ex-husband returned to Japan. Since then, she had been raising Akira alone while teaching Japanese at a language school in Boston. My father and Keiko met when he was enrolling me in the language school so that I wouldn't forget Japanese. They spoke for the first time in a classroom after school. As they were both single parents, they quickly bonded over the shared hardships of raising children alone. My father was particularly moved by Keiko's determination to live vigorously as a single mother in a foreign land. "Naomi, Keiko is truly strong. She left Japan and is living here alone, raising Akira with such determination. I am inspired by her way of life," he told me the day he decided to remarry. For Keiko, marrying my father perhaps signified a release from years of hardship. It freed her from financial worries and allowed her to provide a better education for Akira, and more importantly, it gave her hope for a happy life with a new family. Maybe her expectations were too high initially. At first, Akira and I played together often. He was fluent in Japanese and would kindly correct my poor language skills. We even shared ice cream after school. However, that relationship didn't last long. Keiko tried to treat Akira and me equally, but it was only superficial. "Naomi, have you finished your homework?" "Akira has already finished." "Akira is much more reliable, isn't he?" She would compare, slowly driving a wedge between us. My father tried desperately to forge a new family dynamic with me, Keiko, and Akira, but it was never easy. Our awkward family relationship lasted for years. Still, my father acted as a buffer, somehow maintaining our family bond. However, after his death, our relationship quickly deteriorated. The trigger may have been Akira's divorce, which had started a few months before my father passed away. Akira now lives with Keiko and his daughter, Michelle, who is 8 years old and in the same grade as Jefferson. Akira's marriage, which occurred 8 years ago, was to Erica, a woman of Japanese-American descent who worked at the same large corporation. My father and Keiko were overjoyed, believing it to be an excellent match. The wedding was held at a top-tier hotel, and Keiko proudly showed off the photos to her friends. Despite the superficial glamour, a rift developed between Akira and Erica. Erica was an ambitious career woman who wished to continue working full-time even after their daughter, Michelle, was born. However, balancing childcare and work did not go smoothly, and their marital relationship began to sour. Additionally, Akira struggled to advance in his career. Surrounded by peers who regarded his highly capable wife with high expectations, the pressure on him intensified daily. The disparity in their living standards also cornered him. "Why can't you get promoted? Think about Michelle's education expenses." Such words from Erica gradually cornered Akira. One day, Akira made a significant mistake during an important presentation, causing considerable losses for his company. This event led him to decide to leave his job. However, this decision caused a definitive rift in his relationship with Erica. The divorce mediation was challenging. Ultimately, Erica, citing a lack of time for childcare, agreed that Michelle would primarily live with her father. When Akira returned to his parental home with Michelle, he had lost a considerable amount of weight and seemed like a different person, completely devoid of confidence. Keiko was heartbroken seeing her son in such a state and began taking care of him devotedly. "Akira, have you found a job?" she would ask, to which he would just reply, "Not yet." However, about 6 months later, Akira suddenly announced to his mother that he had secured a job at a major investment firm. Keiko was overjoyed and proudly shared the news with relatives. However, I felt something was off. Akira seemed unchanged from before. One day, I accidentally saw Akira working at a coffee shop. He looked panicked and pleaded, "Please don't tell Mom." It turned out he had lied about the corporate job to avoid worrying her. "Akira, a client of my company is looking for someone who can speak Japanese with management experience," I said quietly. Initially bewildered, Akira looked into my eyes and asked, "Why? Would you consider me?" "Because we're family. Besides, don't you want to show Michelle the kind of father you used to be?" From that day, I began supporting Akira's job hunt in secret. I helped revise his resume, practiced interviews with him, and even wrote recommendation letters. We were making progress together, unnoticed by anyone else. With just 2 weeks until Christmas, our family was approaching a significant turning point. The calm of our middle-class neighborhood was gradually disrupted by seasonal events and family gatherings. I felt that Keiko was looking at me more critically than ever before. The difference in how she treated her grandchildren was stark. To her, I was merely a stepdaughter, and Jefferson was just a step-grandson. Gabriel tried to comfort me, suggesting that it might be Keiko's way of showing love. However, her recent behavior had become more blatant, and the differential treatment of the grandchildren was becoming unbearable at family gatherings. During family photo sessions, Keiko would prominently place Michelle and almost exclude Jefferson. Always conscious of appearances, she sometimes referred to me as the daughter of the previous wife, and would introduce Jefferson to others as the child of my deceased husband's previous wife and her husband. I always felt uncomfortable. While Keiko enthusiastically introduced Akira and Michelle to friends, Jefferson and I were treated as if invisible. Nonetheless, Jefferson and Michelle played well together at school. Recently, a teacher told me that during lunch, Michelle had swapped her vegetables with Jefferson to accommodate his egg allergy. Perhaps the complex emotions of adults don't matter to children. "Mom, it's fun reading books at the library with Michelle," Jefferson would say with an innocent smile, tightening my heart. I wondered how long their pure relationship could last. What was particularly painful were Keiko's words referring to Jefferson as a problem child because of his allergy. At Keiko's birthday party 3 months ago, during the selection of family photos for display, she chose images where Akira and Michelle were prominently featured, relegating us to the corners. There weren't any better photos. "Jefferson looks so gloomy in this one." "Maybe it's because of his allergy," she remarked. I will never forget how Jefferson's shoulders shook at those words. The disparity in their gifts also grew more noticeable over the years. Michelle received the latest tablet for her birthday, while Jefferson got a set of used picture books. The difference was evident to anyone. The same was true on social media. Keiko's Facebook overflowed with photos of Michelle's piano recitals, horse riding classes, and swimming competitions. But not a single photo from Jefferson's school festival was posted. After my father's death, I continued to send money to the household anonymously, fulfilling his wishes, but Keiko was unaware of this. Her cold attitude had begun to pain my heart. Amidst this, Gabriel had to suddenly travel to New York for an important meeting, just 2 days before our family's Christmas party at the family home. The night before he left, Gabriel took my hand and asked with apologetic eyes, "Are you sure you'll be okay with Keiko?" "Yes, I'll be fine. Don't worry." 2 days later, we prepared meticulously. We bought Keiko's favorite apple pie from Whole Foods, and Jefferson dressed in a navy blazer with a white shirt. As he adjusted his collar repeatedly in the car, he asked, "Do you think Grandma will be happy?" Watching him, my heart tightened. We arrived at Keiko's house exactly at 6 p.m. This was also the house filled with memories of my father. Upon opening the door, we were greeted by the aroma of roasted turkey, the sweet scent of sweet potato casserole, and the warm smells of cinnamon and nutmeg. Christmas dinner was ready. As we were led into the living room, I immediately noticed something was off. The dining table was elegantly set, but there were only 4 seats, and there was no place for Jefferson. "Oh, I forgot." Keiko's voice seemed intentional. "Jefferson, you'll have to eat on the living room sofa." The room froze at her words. Michelle looked confused, and then Keiko shockingly added, "My real grandchild is only Akira's child. You are just the child of the other wife's daughter." It felt as though time had stopped. Tears sparkled in Jefferson's eyes, and his small body trembled. Akira turned away, and Michelle could not hide her shock. At that moment, something snapped inside me. For 2 years since my father's death, I had tried to mend our relationship with her. The monthly financial support was also to honor a promise to my father. But I could no longer endure it. "Jefferson, let's go home," I said, taking my son's small hand and standing up. The apple pie we brought remained untouched on the table. The ride home was silent. I could see tears welling up on my face in the rearview mirror. During the drive, Jefferson did not speak a word. I could feel his hand gripping my arm tighter and tighter. When we arrived home, the clock read 7:15 p.m. The sound of the garage door closing seemed louder than usual. The silence after turning off the engine underscored our heartache. "Mommy." Jefferson's voice trembled. His small body curled up in the passenger seat looked about to crumble. "It's okay, Jefferson. Let's spend tonight, just the 2 of us," I reassured him. As soon as we entered the house, Jefferson broke down crying. His cries tore at my heart. "Is it my fault? Did I do something to make Grandma hate me?" I immediately hugged him tightly. "No, you did nothing wrong. Absolutely nothing." We walked over to the sofa in the living room. I tried to stay calm, but every time I felt my son's small body tremble, anger welled up inside me. "Jefferson, just wait a moment," I said, and headed to the kitchen to make some hot cocoa. I took marshmallows from the cupboard and poured them into his favorite blue mug. Even from the living room, I could hear his soft sobs. I brought over a soft blanket with star patterns that Gabriel had bought, draping it over Jefferson's shoulders. "Here's some hot cocoa." I put in lots of marshmallows, I said. Jefferson nodded timidly and reached for the mug. His gesture tightened my chest again. "Jefferson, can I tell Daddy about what happened today?" After a moment, he nodded slightly. "What if Daddy gets angry? Daddy will always be on your side, Jefferson. We are family," I assured him as I picked up my phone. "Hello, Naomi? What's wrong at this hour?" Gabriel's voice from a hotel in New York was immediately filled with concern. "Gabriel, we went to Keiko's house today." While trying to remain as calm as possible, I explained each event in detail, the arrangement of the seats, how Jefferson was treated, and Keiko's words. While explaining, I could hear Gabriel's breathing grow rough over the phone. "I can't believe it. Keiko's behavior has been getting stranger since your father died, but I never imagined it would go this far." His voice mixed anger and sadness. "I'm coming home right away. The meeting is over. I'm booking a flight now." "But you were supposed to come back on tomorrow's flight, right?" "Family comes first. I'm coming home right away." I heard the typing on a computer through the phone. "Naomi, let's stop the monthly support. We've done enough for your father's sake." "Gabriel, Akira should take care of Keiko. We have our own family to look after." "Okay. Do you want to talk to Jefferson?" When Jefferson took the phone, he looked anxious as he held the receiver. "Jefferson, listen. Daddy is very proud of you. You are our precious son. I will definitely be home tomorrow," his father reassured him. Tears welled up in Jefferson's eyes again, but they seemed to be tears of a different kind. That night, after Jefferson fell asleep, I found myself staring at a photo of my father. I remembered how desperately he had tried to bridge the gap between me and Keiko. He had hoped until the end that we would become a real family. The next morning at 7 a.m., the doorbell rang. Jefferson was still asleep. I hurried downstairs and opened the door, only to find Keiko standing there. But this was not the Keiko I knew, with perfect makeup and hairstyle. Her bare face showed deep fatigue, her hair was disheveled, and her hands were slightly trembling. "Naomi, I need to talk," she said, her voice lacking its usual arrogance and instead sounding shaky. "Please come in," I said as I led her into the living room, fighting a mix of complex emotions, anger, distrust, and sadness. As we passed by my father's memorial photo, Keiko paused for a moment. "Would you like some coffee?" I offered. "Thank you," she replied, her voice thin and trembling. When I returned to the living room with the coffee, only the sound of the coffee maker broke the heavy silence. I placed 2 mugs on a tray and returned to the room, where Keiko was staring blankly out the window. When I handed her the coffee, deep fatigue was etched on her profile. "I'm sorry," she began with a formal apology. "I was wrong," she added, hesitating with her words. Keiko pulled out an envelope from her bag. When she opened it, it was neatly lined with records of the financial support I had been sending. "Last night, Akira told me the monthly support came from you. I always thought it was from him. He knew all along. Every time I mistreated you, it hurt him. Akira had confessed everything to her the night before. About the financial support from me, his silent struggles, the lie about his reemployment, how Jefferson and Michelle got along at school, and how I had been helping him with his job hunt. I was so ashamed I couldn't sleep all night to think that you were supporting us all along, and yet It seemed she had something else she couldn't say. I waited silently for her to continue. The ticking of the clock sounded louder than usual. Why didn't you tell me? I always thought that Akira was the one struggling for us. But it was you. It was my promise to Dad, I responded, and Keiko's body shook. On the last day my father was in the hospital, I was alone with him. He was frail from chemotherapy and weakly held my hand. "Naomi, I'm sorry. I've always made things hard for you." "That's not true, Dad." "Yes, I know. You've always been patient, considering my relationship with Keiko. But you don't need to anymore. Just promise me one thing." "What?" "Please look after Keiko. She's been through a divorce and struggled to raise Akira alone. Marrying me was supposed to be a new life for her." My father sighed deeply. "She depended almost entirely on my income for her future in America. She'll really struggle without me. About $1,000 a month. That would help her maintain her current lifestyle. But why not Akira? Akira is still trying to get his life together. He can't afford to look after his mother as well. Naomi, I think you can." His expression was painfully earnest. I could only nod silently. He was worried about you until the end. He wanted me to love you like my own daughter, but I couldn't, Keiko said. After my father's death, her financial issues became severe. Continuing the lavish lifestyle had drained her savings, and she couldn't even afford the initial fee for the upscale retirement home she had planned to enter. Her pride kept her from seeking help, and she maintained herself by believing the financial support was from Akira. "You've managed to balance work and parenting so well. Your family is so harmonious. In contrast, Akira failed in his job and his marriage." I blamed myself for his upbringing and struggled. Pride and desperation made me act irrationally, especially towards Jefferson. Her voice broke off, and she began to cry more intensely. I was terrible to Jefferson. It's unforgivable. Just then, the sound of small footsteps descending the stairs could be heard. "Grandma?" Jefferson's voice froze the room. Keiko slowly looked up, tears still marking her makeup-free face. "Jefferson, I'm truly sorry for what I said yesterday." She stood up tremblingly and knelt in front of him. "I'm really sorry. Grandma was wrong." Jefferson hesitantly approached Keiko. The room was filled with a mysterious tranquility, as if my father was watching over the two of them. Just then, the sound of the front door opening could be heard. "Naomi, Jefferson." It was Gabriel's voice. He must have caught an earlier flight. Gabriel hurried into the living room and was at a loss for words at the sight before him, his stepmother kneeling on the floor, his wife in tears, and his son looking anxious. "What's going on?" A long conversation ensued about Keiko's financial situation, the reasons behind her past actions, and most importantly, the future of the family. Gabriel listened quietly, but attentively. "Why didn't you talk to us sooner?" "I was embarrassed. I didn't want to burden you." "Aren't we family? We could have figured out a solution together." Hearing this, Keiko began to cry again, but these tears seemed different. "Let's discuss the future as a family," I added, and Gabriel nodded. I was feeling a whirlwind of complex emotions inside. I had fulfilled my promise to my father, but I was unsure about how to move forward. Sensing my conflicted emotions, Keiko spoke up. "I'm going to change my lifestyle so I won't have to depend on you." Saying this, she smiled, looking as if a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. "Keiko." I was touched by her resolve and took her hand. "Let's gradually become a real family. Maybe someday we can fulfill Dad's wishes." 6 months have passed since then. I stopped sending money to Keiko. She gave up on her plans for the retirement home and chose a simpler life. Akira also got hired at a company I introduced him to, and he is gradually moving towards independence. While we haven't fully reconciled, at least Jefferson is starting to build a new relationship with his grandmother. It might not be exactly as my father had wished, but perhaps we are starting to find our own way of being a family. Countdown begins. I can't wait to share this momentous occasion with my entire family. This was written in my mother's social media caption. With the entire family, except for me. I discovered I hadn't been invited to my parents' 50th anniversary party through my mother's social media post I had helped create. My heart sank when I saw the elegant invitation with gold lettering perfectly arranged on cream-colored linen. At first, I thought it must be a mistake. Maybe my invitation was delayed. Maybe my brother Maxwell forgot to tell me personally. I had, after all, spent the last 5 months working tirelessly to organize their dream celebration. I paid for the venue deposit when Maxwell claimed the budget was tight. I covered the catering's advance payment when my parents hesitated. I even contributed to decorations that, ironically, I hadn't even seen finalized. My stomach twisted as I scrolled through comments. Friends, relatives, colleagues, everyone expressing excitement about attending this milestone event. Someone even remarked how refined the guest list seemed. Refined. That's when the knot in my chest tightened painfully. I sent my mother a message. Nothing confrontational, just, "Hey Mom. I just saw the post about your party. I haven't got my invitation though. Is it perhaps lost somewhere?" I stared at my phone, anxiety building as minutes ticked by without those typing dots appearing. An hour passed, then 2. By sunset, I was second-guessing myself. Maybe she was just busy. Maybe she simply forgot to respond. Then at 10:34 p.m., my phone finally buzzed. It was a message from my mother. "Listen, Olivia. I was planning to discuss this with you. We've made some difficult decisions about the guest list. It's a very high-class affair, you understand? We need to maintain a certain atmosphere. No offense, but you wouldn't really fit the sophisticated setting. I know you'll celebrate our special day in your own way, though. Love you. Nothing about me mattered to my family. To them, I wasn't a successful entrepreneur. I was just the cleaning lady. A woman whose hands are always cracked from household chemicals, who gets dressed for practical reasons rather than style. My parents and brother have looked down on me for this. They believed that true success meant having a corner office, wearing designer suits, and running a respectable business regardless of my profit margin, not managing housekeepers. They never said it directly, but I caught their expressions every time I arrived at family gatherings in simple clothes. That slight grimace when I mentioned my latest business achievements. When they introduced me to someone, they would quickly and dismissively say, "This is my sister who runs some housekeeping service," as if I were something to be hidden. And now, despite everything I'd contributed, they had deliberately excluded me from our parents' milestone celebration. I had financed most of their anniversary party, yet somehow wasn't refined enough to attend it. I should have anticipated this. It wasn't the first time my family made me feel like I didn't belong. The warning signs had been present for years. Subtle digs during Sunday dinners, condescending remarks about my business, how my parents practically glowed when Maxwell received his promotion at the financial firm, but barely acknowledged my achievement when I expanded my business services to 3 new neighborhoods. Yet despite their treatment, I never refused when they needed help. When my parents wanted an extravagant anniversary celebration beyond their means, I stepped forward to secure the venue deposit, paid the catering in advance, even covered part of the custom decorations, all without expecting gratitude. The next morning, I drove to my parents' elegant suburban home with my heart pounding. The party was less than a week away. I didn't call ahead. I needed to hear their unfiltered thoughts. As I quietly entered, my mother's refined voice drifted from the kitchen. "Well, you know how Olivia presents herself," she was saying, her tone carrying that familiar subtle disappointment that always stung. "I simply can't have her embarrassing us all," my father replied firmly. "This is a sophisticated anniversary celebration. I won't have her showing up looking like she just finished scrubbing someone's floors." My hands trembled with anger as I clenched them tightly. "She is still family," my brother muttered, though his voice carried no real conviction. "Precisely, and as family, she should understand this isn't about her," my father snapped. "I don't need her there making the guests uncomfortable. She simply doesn't belong in that caliber of gathering." My chest tightened painfully. I pushed open the door, stepping into their pristine kitchen. Maxwell's face was drained of color. My mother immediately busied herself rearranging appetizers that were already perfectly arranged. "So that's how you all see me?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady despite my racing heart. My father hesitated before squaring his shoulders in that corporate posture he'd perfected. "Don't be so sensitive. It's simply not your type of social event." "My type of social event?" I repeated, crossing my arms defensively. "Come on, Olivia, you understand perfectly well," he sighed dramatically. "Everyone attending is in executive circles, finance professionals, my university colleagues, people who understand proper etiquette. You have absolutely nothing in common with them." "Right, because I run a successful service business instead of handling paperworks, I must be too uncultured to maintain proper conversation." "I never suggested that," he backpedaled quickly, though his expression betrayed him. My mother sighed delicately. "Darling, it's simply a different caliber of gathering. You must admit you do present yourself rather practically sometimes. You're always in those functional clothes, and you don't carry yourself with the refinement our guests expect. I own a growing company. I countered, struggling to maintain my composure. "I generate more revenue than half those sophisticated guests you're inviting, but because I don't wear designer outfits daily, I'm somehow inadequate?" Maxwell groaned impatiently. "This isn't about money. It's about presentation and social standing. Yes, you've helped significantly with the celebration expenses, which we appreciate, but this is Mom and Dad's special milestone. Everything must be flawless. You simply wouldn't blend with the atmosphere we're creating." There it was, finally exposed. The harsh truth. It meant nothing that I'd covered their expenses, that I'd financially rescued, that I'd sacrificed more for this family than anyone. To them, I would forever be just the cleaning lady. I exhaled slowly, nodding while my heart felt like breaking. "Your message is loud and clear. Don't be so dramatic," my mother interjected with practiced elegance. "We'll have a small, lovely private family dinner with you after the celebration. It would suit you better." I smiled, but my eyes remained cold. "You're absolutely right. That would suit me better. Because in my world, when someone supports you, you don't repay them with contempt and exclusion." I walked out before they could respond, my whole body trembling. As I drove toward my office, my phone chimed with a text from Maxwell. "Maxwell, don't blow this out of proportion, okay? You know we love you. By the way, can you still handle the final payment for the premium champagne and specialty cake? Due this Friday. XO." I laughed so hard I needed to pull over, in the pure audacity. He truly believed I would still pay. He expected me to swallow my pride as I'd always done. He had no clue I was completely done. By the time I reached my office building, my decision was final. For years, I'd functioned as the family's financial backup, their emergency resource during difficult times, the one who never refused, regardless of personal cost. I'd convinced myself this was my responsibility, what being family meant. But this crossed every line. They didn't just take my money, they took it while fundamentally disrespecting me. They happily accepted every deposit, every transfer, every dollar I provided, but when it came to acknowledging me in front of their elite social circle, I suddenly became an embarrassment. Yet they still had the nerve to text about celebration expenses, as if nothing had happened. I'd been their convenient doormat for years. No more. And then came the morning of the celebratory event for my parents' anniversary. I woke up feeling strangely weightless. No stress, no guilt, no obligations. For the first time in years, I wasn't crushed under their expectations. I had no reason to rush around solving last-minute crises. Nobody called demanding extra money or begging me to rescue the situation, because I wasn't invited, and because I'd finally stopped allowing their manipulation. But apparently, my family hadn't stopped viewing me as their financial solution. At 11:27 a.m., my phone showed Mom calling. I let it ring. At 11:42 a.m., Dad called. Ignored. At 12:03 p.m., my screen lit up with a message from Aunt Margaret. "Aunt Margaret, Olivia, you won't believe what's happening. The hotel just refused them entry." I stared at my phone, then laughed with genuine relief. That night, I had canceled both the venue and the catering. I replied to my parents and brother, Sorry, I wouldn't want to embarrass you by having my money associated with your sophisticated celebration. You'll manage without my help. Best wishes." No emojis, no pretense, just honest truth. Barely 3 minutes passed before my phone rang with calls. I sent them straight to voicemail. But it kept ringing. From Mom. From Dad. I had 12 missed calls lighting up my screen. "Maxwell, what exactly do you mean you're not paying?" The special order was already confirmed. "Maxwell, you cannot simply withdraw now. The entire event depends on you. "Mom, darling, don't be petty. This is merely a misunderstanding. We should discuss this." "Dad, we expected you to be more mature than this." I stared at my phone, feeling a painful knot in my chest. Not one message contained an apology. Not a single, "I'm sorry we hurt you." Just demands and expectations. Just the assumption I would continue in my assigned role. I called Maxwell. He answered immediately. "Are you satisfied now?" he shouted. I leaned back, feeling strangely calm. "About what exactly?" "Don't play innocent," he snapped. "The entire celebration is ruined." "Oh," I replied casually. "Financial shortfall? You knew perfectly well we couldn't afford this." He yelled. "You were supposed to contribute. You committed to this." I laughed softly. "No, you simply assumed I would." Silence hung between us. "Look, I don't understand what's gotten into you, but you're being completely irrational. You already committed to these expenses, so..." "I've reconsidered," I interrupted firmly. There was complete silence. "Excuse me?" "I've reconsidered my position," I repeated myself deliberately, each word crystal clear. "I won't be contributing another cent. You'll need to handle it yourselves." "Are you actually serious right now?" His voice rose sharply. "You're actually going to betray Mom and Dad like this?" I couldn't help but laugh. "A betrayal? You mean like how you deliberately excluded me from their celebration because I don't fit the sophisticated atmosphere? Or how you discussed me as though I were some embarrassing family secret? That kind of betrayal?" He made an exasperated sound. "You deliberately let us fail," he finally said, his voice unsteady. "No," I corrected. "You failed entirely on your own merit." And then, for the first time ever, his carefully maintained facade cracked. "I don't understand," he whispered. "Why couldn't you just help us? After everything we've been through, after everything I've done." "Everything you've done?" I repeated, my patience evaporating. "You mean exploiting me for years? Taking my money without appreciation? Treating me with contempt the moment I wasn't financially useful?" "I never intended things to be taken that way," he muttered. "You never do," I replied coldly. "That's precisely the problem." The silence stretched uncomfortably. Then his voice trembled. "So that's your final decision? You're simply walking away from your family?" He sighed. "I just wanted perfection." "If I invite you now, will you help? You don't want me at Mom and Dad's celebration? Fine. But you don't get to use my money while pretending I'm not good enough to attend. You've made it perfectly clear I don't belong there, so I'm respecting your boundaries. Stop being so incredibly sensitive," he snapped. "You're just upset about not receiving an invitation. Grow up." I took a deep breath, maintaining my composure. "What's fascinating is you think this is about the invitation. That's not it at all. It's that you've used me financially while simultaneously looking down on me. That's what truly infuriates me." "Oh, please," he scoffed dismissively. "Your business is thriving. You wouldn't even notice the expense. There it was. No gratitude. It's not even being entitled anymore. Just naked, unashamed greed." "You're absolutely right," I replied, my voice now icy. "My business is thriving, and not a single dollar from it will ever go to you." "Never again." "Wait," he began, but I ended the call. This time, I was truly finished. Without the payment, the hotel canceled everything. Staff literally locked the reception room while guests were arriving. People stood confused in their formal attire outside, as the event planner frantically attempted to explain. I heard that because the guests had gathered and the situation became unmanageable, the hotel manager specially offered the backyard for free as an emergency measure. However, there was naturally no food prepared, and the atmosphere was plain without luxurious decorations. The scene of white plastic tables and chairs by the poolside, with just a few hastily gathered vases, was far removed from the sophisticated, upscale anniversary celebration they had been bragging about for months. Aunt Margaret later explained the situation in detail over the phone. "Olivia, you should have seen it. Your father could barely speak to anyone. He just stared at the ground in front of 80 invited guests, as if wishing the ground would open up and swallow him." "How was Mom?" I asked, unable to contain my curiosity. "Your mother was wearing her branded clothes with her usual perfect makeup, but her face was bright red, and her smile was clearly forced. When some guests sarcastically said, 'What a wonderful anniversary party,' she could only nod, unable to even make excuses." My aunt continued, suppressing a laugh. "They looked so miserable. Since they were always bragging about their wealth, I'm sure many were secretly pleased to see them in such a situation." "And Maxwell?" I asked. "He kept apologizing to the guests, making excuses like the gourmet food will be served later, the champagne delivery is delayed, and this is just a gathering for appetizers. The real party will start soon." But everyone understood the situation. His boss and all the important financial figures he was trying to impress were there too. Then what happened? About an hour later, when the small amount of cheese and crackers prepared as hors d'oeuvres ran out, Maxwell hurriedly ordered from a nearby pizza place. A few bottles of cheap sparkling wine were delivered instead of fine wine. Oh, the misery! My aunt shook her head. "You should have seen their faces when your father's college dean, while putting pizza in his mouth, said, 'This is an interesting choice.'" One of Maxwell's colleagues, clearly drunk, loudly exclaimed, "Maxwell, you're not much of a party planner. You've been saying it would be wonderful for months, and this is the result?" After that, an uncomfortable silence spread across the gathering. According to my aunt, what was particularly painful was when my parents tried to give their golden anniversary speech. Without a microphone, she simply stood by the poolside, attempting to speak to an uncomfortably quiet audience. They looked pitiful. When my father began with "to celebrate this luxurious 50 years of marriage," someone coughed and someone else laughed quietly. Unable to continue, my father quickly returned to his seat after saying, "Thank you for coming today." In the end, everyone left after 2 hours. No commemorative gifts, no prepared toasts. It was just a miserable gathering, my aunt concluded. Your mother was quietly crying at the end of the night. Your father tried to comfort her, but he was just as upset. Imagining the scene, I felt a little guilty, but that feeling quickly disappeared. This was the path they chose. By excluding me, they also excluded my financial support. The reality is that simple. A few days later, I received a short message from my father. Your absence was felt. Not an apology, much less understanding. Just an implicit criticism that their failure was due to my absence. I didn't reply. Maxwell's social media posts also suddenly decreased, especially his boasts about his sophisticated life. Instead, he began talking about a new chapter in life and the beauty of simple living. Ironically, he now seemed to be praising the lifestyle he had criticized me for years. I didn't contact them. I didn't apologize. I didn't ask. For the first time in years, I felt completely liberated. It took several months for my parents to finally accept that my position would not change. First, they tried guilt, then hostility, and finally complete silence. Sadly, they ended up bearing the full cost of the hotel and catering due to the last-minute cancellations. The luxurious hotel strictly applied the cancellation clause, charging fully for the reserved venue, premium champagne, custom cake, floral decorations, and even the dedicated band ordered for the event. The cancellation fees were mercilessly charged, leaving Maxwell and my parents with substantial debt. According to Aunt Margaret, the total amount was astronomical. They incurred over $20,000 in debt, she secretly informed me. The hotel manager showed no sympathy. The contract had fine print stating cancellations after 1 week prior are subject to full payment. They either hadn't read it or thought it couldn't happen to them. My parents' situation was dire. They had to dip into savings they had set aside for retirement. Their long-planned European trip was indefinitely postponed, and their comfortable retirement plans were abruptly forced to change. My father had to resume working part-time by giving university lectures, and my mother started working for a neighborhood housekeeping company which she had previously refused as she did not want to work under me. Your father sits with his head in his hands every Sunday. Going over the household budget, my aunt said. They're even considering renting out the remote workspace in their home. I can't believe your mother used to call that shameful. But now, they need to do anything that brings in income. How are they maintaining their dignity? I asked, feeling a bit of sympathy for their plight. Honestly, it's difficult, my aunt replied. Their status in social circles has greatly diminished. They're no longer invited to lavish dinner parties as before. It's especially unbearable for your mother. She lamented to me on the phone, no one wants to associate with us anymore, all because of our failed party. Maxwell had to vacate his home and move to a more affordable place. He's struggling with monthly payments, Aunt Margaret explained. Maxwell's credit cards have reached their limits, and he started weekend work as an accounting consultant in addition to his job at the financial firm. It's the kind of work he once sneered at as vulgar labor-like work. Ironic, isn't it? He now relies on the kind of diligence you've shown. My aunt never directly asked me to bail them out, but the implication was clear, especially when she emphasized that they deeply regret their past mistakes. However, I didn't change my position. I had functioned as their financial safety net for years, and it was time for them to fully understand how one-sided that relationship had been. This was a harsh lesson they needed to learn. As for Maxwell, he never formally apologized, but I recently received a brief message from him. I was wrong. I should have respected you, your work, your success. That was all. Simple, not emotional, and most importantly, no requests for money. That's some progress. I didn't reply to that either. And myself? My business continues to flourish beautifully. I've expanded into 3 new regions and doubled my number of employees. Recently, an industry magazine featured me as one of the most influential female entrepreneurs. And the sweetest thing is that every dollar I earn is rightfully mine, without family members who take it for granted. That's what freedom is. The turning point in my life arrived on my 12th birthday. In the kitchen, where the morning sun streamed through the window, my mother called me over. That day, I had woken up a bit earlier than usual and had carefully combed my hair. It was the first day of the art club's exhibition. Lindsay, make sure you come home by 3:30 today. You need to prepare dinner for your brother. Her words pierced my heart like cold ice. I had been up early, double-checking the art supplies I would bring, and practicing my presentation in my mind. But Mom, today is the start of the art clubs. Lindsay, her voice was tinged with its usual coldness. Jonathan has important football practice. A growing boy needs proper nutrition, doesn't he? You should understand that. Jonathan, lounging on the living room sofa with the latest iPhone 16 in hand, sported a mean smirk. My phone was an old model, handed down from him. Sometimes it was even difficult to receive messages. Come on, hurry off to school. Inside, I felt something being crushed. It might have been the sound of my dreams and aspirations being squashed under the weight of reality. My daily routine was completely predetermined. I woke up at 6 a.m. to prepare breakfast for the family, and as soon as I returned from school, I immediately started preparing Jonathan's dinner. On cold winter mornings, I would rub my sleepy eyes and stand in the kitchen, preparing breakfast for the family. My hands were roughened and reddened from washing dishes and doing housework. I ironed Jonathan's clothes and sometimes even helped him with his homework. While solving math problems, I would think about my own homework. However, the time I could use for my studies always came late at night. Meanwhile, Jonathan could spend his after-school hours however he liked: football, debate club, programming classes. If he said he wanted to do something, our parents would immediately say, "Sure." They spared no expense for him. New spiked shoes, the latest laptop, private lessons. When I wanted to buy new stationery, my mother dismissed it with, "Don't be extravagant." In the midst of all this, my only sympathizer was my mother's sister, Hillary. Her home became my true sanctuary. On weekends, I would pedal across town on my old bicycle to my aunt's house. As I pedaled, I could feel my heart lightening. When I arrived at the entrance of her old brick house, my aunt was always waiting for me in the garden. "Ah, Lindsay," she would greet me with a warm smile. Her smile overflowed with genuine affection. We would sit at the garden table and have tea. "Lindsay, you have wonderful talents," she would say while looking at my report card. Her voice was filled with pure pride, especially in math and business skills. "These are special talents. You will surely find great opportunities in the future." Her words deeply resonated with me. These were words of recognition and encouragement, which I never heard at home. They planted a small seed of hope within me. However, as I entered high school, the situation worsened. Jonathan was accepted into one of the top business schools in the state. On the day of the announcement, our whole family went to see the school's notice board. The moment we found Jonathan's name, my mother cheered, and my father puffed out his chest proudly. On the spot, my father reserved a full-course meal at an upscale restaurant. My parents also planned an elaborate celebration at our home, inviting all our relatives. Most of the preparations, of course, fell on me: creating the invitations, arranging the food, decorating the venue. I ended up having to shoulder all these responsibilities. In the living room, a large banner reading "Congratulations, Jonathan" hung, and expensive catering food was laid out. From morning till night, I ran around following the caterer's instructions, serving and cleaning up. On the day of the celebration, our house overflowed with the voices of relatives. The pop of champagne corks, congratulatory words, and laughter filled the air. I moved between the kitchen and the living room, constantly serving the stream of dishes that kept coming. "He's our pride," my father repeated several times in a slightly drunken voice. Glass in hand, he passionately addressed the relatives. "Jonathan has been special since he was a child. A bright future awaits him in the business world. He will surely achieve great success." With tears of joy in her eyes, my mother showed off Jonathan's childhood album to the relatives. "Look, this is his picture at age 3. Even then, he was very smart," she boasted proudly. The album detailed Jonathan's growth. Photos of him winning first place at a sports day, his beaming face at a piano recital, happy expressions during family trips. However, my photos hardly appeared in any of the albums. If they did, I was just a small figure in the background. The following year, I was admitted to the State University's business school as the top applicant, and also received a full scholarship for my academic excellence. On the day the results were announced, I went to check them alone. It seemed my family had no interest in the fact that I had applied to college. Other applicants were accompanied by their entire families. Feeling lonely and isolated, I headed to the venue. When I saw my name at the top of the list, I felt a warmth well up in my eyes. However, there was no one there to share my joy with. My acceptance letter was carelessly placed on a corner of the kitchen counter, barely noticeable among piles of bills and advertisements. It was several days later when my mother found it. "We saved on tuition," at least was all she said. There were no words of congratulations for my success. The only one who truly rejoiced at my achievement was my Aunt Hilary. When I informed her of my acceptance, she immediately took me out to celebrate. We quietly celebrated my success at the most stylish Italian restaurant in town. "Lindsay, your talents are special," my aunt said as she hugged me. "Business studies are the perfect choice for your logical thinking and creative ideas. You will surely become a great manager." Those words were deeply engraved in my heart. In her eyes shone true pride and affection. That night, we talked late into the night about the future. My aunt shared her experiences and discussed the possibilities for women in the business world. However, life is unpredictable. One day in my sophomore year, I received a call from my aunt. Her voice was weak, different from usual. "Lindsay." Her voice trembled even through the phone. "Can you come to the hospital?" I immediately left my lecture and took a taxi to the hospital. My heart was pounding, and my head was filled with anxiety. When I arrived at her hospital room, my aunt was lying in bed, her usually vibrant expression gone, her complexion pale. The doctor's diagnosis was grim. She had progressive cancer. She didn't have much time left. Hearing those words felt like my world had stopped. The days I spent in her hospital room became the most painful and precious times of my life. I spent as much time as possible with her between my lectures. Within her limited strength, my aunt taught me many things, from the basics of investing to the importance of decisions in life. "Remember, Lindsay," she said weakly, holding my hand one day, "the most important thing in investing is a long-term perspective. Don't be blinded by short-term gains. And above all, believe in yourself. No matter what others say, trust your own judgment." Her words were filled with the wisdom of life, not just about investing, but as a guideline for living. "Lindsay," she told me one quiet night, the moonlight streaming into the hospital room, "I'm leaving my estate to you. My house, my savings, everything. I believe you will use it well." I couldn't stop my tears. It was more than just an inheritance, it was a testament to her trust, expectations, and love. My aunt passed away on a calm spring morning, smiling at me until the end. After her death, the contents of the inheritance were revealed, and it was far beyond what I had imagined. It included a house in a quiet residential area, several real estate properties, and a significant amount of savings. She had built her wealth steadily over a long time, a testament to her prudence and foresight. When my parents learned of the inheritance I received, their attitude towards me changed dramatically. "Lindsay, we should have understood you better," my mother suddenly said one day, her tone unusually sweet. "You graduated top of your class, received a full scholarship for your excellent grades. You're smart and always think of the family first." It was a tone of voice I had never heard before. She had disregarded the day of my university acceptance announcement as trivial, barely even looking at the acceptance letter. "I have not received any words of celebration." "Perhaps we were wrong all along," my mother admitted. Suddenly, my father began to show interest in me, saying, "You really had great talent all along." Over the weekend, they invited me to dine at a fancy restaurant and even gifted me new clothes. I could only smirk inwardly at their calculative behavior. Their change in attitude was clearly not driven by genuine reflection, but by a clear interest in my inheritance. I cherished the words from my aunt, "Trust your own judgment." While majoring in business administration at university, I also obtained a qualification in real estate management. I invested the inheritance my aunt left me in my future. I stayed late in the library studying and attended real estate seminars on weekends. I dedicated all my time to my personal growth. I also spent time renovating my aunt's house. I replaced the old plumbing, enhanced the insulation, and updated the kitchen with the latest equipment. However, I made sure to preserve the garden she loved as much as possible in its original form. The rose bushes continued to bloom beautifully season after season. Sometimes, while tending to the garden, memories of my aunt would come flooding back. After graduation, I joined a major consulting firm. At work, I leveraged my strong analytical skills and soon led several large projects. I quickly gained the trust of clients and was promoted to the youngest manager in my 3rd year. I steadily built a solid track record in financial analysis, a field often deemed unsuitable for women. I also started investing in real estate, beginning with a small rental apartment and gradually expanding my portfolio. I faithfully adhered to the investment principles I learned from my aunt and steadily increased my assets. I was meticulous in selecting properties, efficient in renovations, and thorough in tenant management. My aunt's teachings were alive in every decision I made. By the age of 30, I had achieved complete financial independence. I had a stable income from both my job and investments, and gradually, my parents' interference lessened. Then one day, my brother Jonathan unexpectedly visited. I was reviewing work documents in the living room I had renovated when the doorbell rang on a fall afternoon. Peering through the peephole, I saw Jonathan dressed in an unfamiliar high-end suit, accompanied by a strikingly beautiful woman. As I opened the door, Jonathan wore an unusually humble expression, and a thin layer of sweat was visible on his forehead. "Hey, Lindsay," he said, his voice lacking its former arrogance and instead mixed with a somewhat contrived sweetness. "I need to talk to you." I invited them into the living room. The woman was dressed in a high-end brand dress and perfectly applied makeup, yet her eyes harbored a calculating look. As soon as she entered, her gaze assessed the expensive furniture and decorations. "This is my wife, Angela." Jonathan introduced her. Angela smiled politely, but the smile did not reach her eyes. I had received an invitation to their wedding but had chosen to abstain because I wanted to keep some distance from a family that only engaged with me for my assets. I sent a minimal monetary gift as a celebration, avoiding attending the milestones in my brother's life. Her perfectly shaped eyebrows twitched slightly, betraying a cold glint in her eyes. As I made coffee in the kitchen, Jonathan came over, leaving Angela behind. He began to speak cautiously, tapping the floor with his high-quality leather shoes and avoiding eye contact. "Lindsay, the truth is..." He paused, his voice tinged with desperation. "My company has gone bankrupt. I need a temporary place to stay." I could hardly hide my surprise. Jonathan had been flaunting a flashy success on social media after starting his business. Luxury cars, lavish vacations, and a glamorous wedding. The weekly posts depicted a life of a successful person. But was it all just for show? "How long is temporary?" I asked, maintaining my composure. Outside, the evening sky gradually changed color. 1 month, 2 at most. Jonathan responded quickly, his voice laced with urgency. "I'm setting up a new business. I'm close to sealing a deal with investors. Just need a place until then." Angela, left alone in the living room, silently examined her nails. Her expression clearly conveyed discomfort with the situation. Her meticulously groomed eyebrows were slightly furrowed. In the end, I agreed. It was a big mistake. The first week went by peacefully. However, gradually, a sense of discomfort began to grow. When I returned from work, I found remnants of expensive catered dinners scattered in the kitchen. Empty bottles of luxury wine were strewn about, and containers from desserts piled up. Angela's shopping bags accumulated at the entrance, and new brand-name clothes kept being added to the closet. Despite hearing that their stay was temporary, their lifestyle suggested no intention of keeping that promise. My past experiences enveloped me in a faint anxiety. One night, I received a call from my parents. "Lindsay, we need to discuss something." Her voice mixed the same tone she used when she used to impose housework on me. "It's about the charges on Jonathan and Angela's card." "Charges?" I frowned. I put down my pen and leaned back deeply in my chair. Yes, it's about $3,000 a month, my mother continued as if it were obvious. We gave them a family card. I heard you promised to cover their daily expenses, including dining out. They can't seem to stop dining at expensive restaurants or ordering luxury catering. And Angela seems to need new clothes, considering her position. Something inside me was about to snap. Emotions I had suppressed for years threatened to burst forth. Mom, I made no such promise, not at all. But Jonathan said. No matter what Jonathan says, I am not paying for their lavish food expenses. My voice was surprisingly strong. The same goes for Angela's clothes. After hanging up, I confronted Jonathan. I just got a call from Mom about your credit card charges, I said, and Jonathan visibly panicked. Oh, that, he stuttered. Pressing him with the same firm tone I had used with my mother, he began to reveal the truth, perhaps because he had never been approached like this by me before, or perhaps because he felt guilty. He had lied to our parents, claiming I had agreed to cover all their living expenses. Lindsay, things are really tough right now. Jonathan started making excuses. He loosened his designer tie, his demeanor frantic. I haven't been able to tell Angela about the bankruptcy. What? I exclaimed, my voice raising in anger and surprise, feeling the atmosphere in the room freeze. You haven't told your wife the truth. Jonathan turned his face away, his expensive suit collar beginning to dampen with sweat. She's accustomed to a certain standard of living. If she knew the truth, At that moment, I understood. Jonathan had lied to his wife, deceived our parents, and was trying to use me. To maintain appearances and hide his bankruptcy, he had been presenting my house as his own to his wife. Angela was not aware that this house was mine. She thought it was okay to charge extravagant dining expenses to my parents and treated my home as if it were their own. Even my home office was overflowing with her cosmetics and clothes. If this continued, it wasn't just my home at risk, but my salary and assets as well. I needed to take action immediately. I knew it was best to create physical distance from them. I had to stop the interference in my home office too. I decided to take early retirement. My real estate income was stable, and I had sufficient savings. When I began planning a trip around the world, perhaps worried about living expenses, Angela haughtily said, "We need to talk." Her eyes gleamed coldly beneath her perfect makeup. "You're retiring? Just because you live here for free doesn't mean you can slack off now." Free? Slack off. You seem to cover everything but rent yourself. If you lose your job, you'll probably end up relying on Jonathan for living expenses. Maybe you should start paying rent from now on, $2,000 a month. I think that's a reasonable request from the owner of this house. I couldn't help but laugh. Angela, you're mistaken. I own this house. Jonathan has been lying to you. It seemed Jonathan still hadn't told her the truth. Right then, Angela called Jonathan on her phone. Her voice demanding the truth echoed loudly through the quiet house. "I can't tolerate you living this luxurious life." Angela stood at the front door, trembling with anger as she confronted me. Her hands, clutching a high-end brand bag, were visibly shaking. "This house is mine. I have rights to it. From the moment I married Jonathan, this became my right. However, I had gained the strength to not succumb to anyone's demands anymore." Angela's aggressive words no longer instilled fear in me. The days spent with my aunt and the career I had built for myself gave me solid confidence. "Leave," I told her quietly but firmly, "and do not come back. This is my house, a precious place entrusted to me by my aunt." Seemingly at a loss for words, Angela stormed out of the house. The sound of her high heels striking the flooring resonated behind her. No longer would I let anyone control my life. I choose my own path. My resolve was unshakable. I have no intention of relinquishing this house to anyone. A few weeks later, I heard that Angela had filed for divorce. Jonathan did not return to my house, nor did he move back in with Angela, so I sent all his belongings to my parents' house. But it wasn't over yet. My parents and Jonathan began demanding that I give up the house to them. As a sister, you should help your brother, my mother said. We're family, my father added. You've ruined my life, Jonathan accused. I ignored all their communications and proceeded with the round-the-world trip I had planned. Upon returning, I started a small-scale real estate consulting firm, focusing particularly on programs that support women's financial independence. I want to pass on to the next generation what my aunt did for me by supporting women in circumstances similar to mine. Becoming a business owner helped me see through Jonathan's lies. Despite claiming he was preparing for a new business, it was impossible for Jonathan, with his damaged credit, to start a venture. He must have known he had no future, but didn't want to let go of his beautiful wife and tried to prolong the inevitable. He relied on me for a place to live and borrowed family credit cards from our parents. Lacking business acumen, I was deceived by Jonathan's careless lies. Through my real estate consulting firm, I reconnected with a local friend who updated me on my family's current situation. According to my friend, Jonathan was working at a small company in a rural area. My friend saw him walking away, dressed in a cheap suit, looking worn out, a far cry from the man who once wore expensive suits. After being kicked out of my house, Jonathan and Angela's lives spiraled downwards rapidly. They moved to a luxury hotel, but soon their credit card limits were reached, and they couldn't make payments. The fact that the house was in my name and their credit cards were maxed out was enough to fuel Angela's suspicions. As soon as she learned of Jonathan's bankruptcy, she disappeared with expensive jewelry and clothes she had accumulated. It later turned out she had already been scouting for another wealthy man. During the divorce, Angela demanded compensation, but Jonathan no longer had the means to pay. Furious, she took to social media to expose details of Jonathan's mismanagement. It seems to have made the news and become a topic of discussion. The repercussions gradually spread, leading to lawsuits from investors. Jonathan's name was completely discredited in the industry due to accusations of fraudulent management. On the other hand, Angela was unable to achieve the kind of high-class marriage she had hoped for. As she aged, her once radiant skin, ravaged by a life of luxury, had lost its youthful glow. Above all, a woman who exposed her husband's misconduct on social media in hopes of compensation was shunned by wealthy men. Angela had to pawn her high-end luxury items to maintain her lavish lifestyle, but eventually she was forced to live alone in a cheap apartment. Jonathan's downfall also affected our parents. They had invested their retirement funds in his business ventures. Caught up in bankruptcy and lawsuits, my parents lost their retirement savings and were forced to move to a small apartment in the suburbs. I hear they've become reclusive, avoiding the curious eyes of their neighbors. Angela now hops from job to job as a receptionist at beauty clinics. Her once haughty demeanor has vanished, and she often finds herself apologizing to clients and apologizing to her bosses daily. On social media, the friends who once praised Jonathan are now making light of his downfall. Comments on Angela's posts are filled with sarcasm. The photos from their lavish wedding have become a subject of mockery. My company continues to grow steadily, and we sometimes receive media coverage from newspapers and business magazines. Jonathan might have seen those articles. Hearing about my family from friends feels like a story from a distant past now. I was once caught up in my family, but having overcome various trials, I feel a sense of complete independence. Beautiful flowers still bloom in the garden of my house. This place, inherited from my aunt, is my pride and a symbol of my strength. It is a precious place I have protected from my brother and his wife, and from my family. Sometimes I feel lonely, but I accept it as the price of freedom. True family is not necessarily about blood relations. Perhaps it is the bonds with those who understand and support each other that truly define family. Your value is not determined by others. This was my aunt's words that continue to live on in my heart. Ha, Juana, Why do you always look so plain? Honestly, thinking that you're my daughter depresses me. And being 38 and still single, what a troublesome existence you are. Troublesome existence? Compared to you, Melissa takes after me. She's truly beautiful and charismatic. It's hard to believe you two were born to the same mother. Maybe you were switched at birth at the hospital, don't you think? But Dad always said I looked just like him. That's true. I should have been more careful when choosing a partner back then. No matter how much money someone makes, marrying a man with such a plain appearance leads to having a daughter as dull as you. Don't talk about Dad that way. Unlike you, Dad always treated Melissa and me equally. Well, your plain father and you were two of a kind close buddies, weren't you? But unfortunately, he's no longer here. Now there's no one left to defend you. I can hardly remember being praised by my mother growing up. I have an older sister, 2 years older than me, who is both beautiful and highly intelligent. To my mother, Melissa was her pride and joy, whereas plain and unremarkable me seemed to lack any lovable qualities in her eyes. I'm Juana Price, a 38-year-old single office worker. My sister graduated from a prestigious national university, joined a top-tier company, and married her older colleague at age 28. Her husband, Harrison Green, is a promising elite employee highly regarded in his field. Harrison Green, nice to meet you. Just like my sister, he's flawless, and the two are viewed as an ideal couple, envied by everyone around them. Because Harrison frequently travels for work, spending more than half the year away from home, we've barely had the chance to meet and haven't grown close. My sister gave birth to her first daughter at 33 and had a son at 37. After her maternity leave, she returned to work, balancing her job and childcare seamlessly. Beautiful and diligent, both at work and at home, my sister is someone I deeply admire. That's why, whenever my mother compares us, saying, "You'll never measure up to your sister," I have no choice but to accept it without protest. Still, being ranked by your own mother leaves an indelible scar on a child's heart. My father passed away 7 years ago due to illness. It was just after my sister had given birth to her first daughter. My sister said she was glad our father got to see his grandchild before he passed, as it brought him great joy. People often said I resembled my father as a child. Moreover, my father treated both my sister and me with equal love and care. Melissa was studious from an early age and always sat at her desk as soon as she came home. Studying is fun. When I learn new things, it feels like my mind is expanding. I remember her saying things like that often. On the other hand, I struggled with studying and couldn't seem to retain anything. The idea of my mind expanding made no sense to me. With more knowledge, it feels like the future is opening up. Thinking that way makes the future seem so bright. Though Melissa spoke passionately about it, I couldn't see such a shining future. I never found studying enjoyable, nor did I have the passion for it that she did. Despite this, Melissa always devoted herself to studying at home and excelled in sports outside. She consistently won track and field competitions and served as the anchor in relay races, crossing the finish line first. Watching her, I felt words like gifted in both academics and athletics and beauty with brains were made for her. There's a saying that heaven does not bestow two gifts, but observing Melissa, it felt like she had been blessed with not just two but everything. So I had resigned myself somewhere along the way, thinking it might be inevitable for my mother to adore my older sister. No matter how hard I tried, I could never measure up to her. My sister was someone I admired, but as people around us often compared us with remarks like, "Even though you're sisters," it gradually became awkward to be around her. Though our relationship wasn't hostile, we weren't especially close either. Her talent and achievements were so overwhelming that she seemed like someone from another dimension to me. As I grew older, I began to think that comparing us was pointless. Even so, my heart was repeatedly wounded by the blatant sarcasm my mother would throw my way. No matter how much you try to get used to criticism or comparisons, it's something you can never truly adapt to. "Mom, Could you stop comparing me to Juana? We're different people. You're right, my bad. But can you blame me? The difference is just so obvious. I can see why you would feel upset, Melissa. Sometimes, when my mother would make sarcastic remarks, my sister would step in to defend me. But even her words sounded to me like, stop comparing me to someone like her. When you have an exceptionally talented sister, no matter how much you try not to think about it, a sense of inferiority inevitably takes root in some corner of your heart. No matter where I went, people would say, your sister is so and so, constantly comparing us. It was only natural that this would happen. And my mother, as if enjoying these comparisons, would keep adding fuel to the fire. Juana really takes after your father, unlike you, Melissa. When my mother laughed while saying this, I felt an inexplicable discomfort. Being told I resembled my father made me happy. I loved my father dearly. But the tone in my mother's words carried a hint of disdain toward my father, and that was something I couldn't stand. In such moments, my father always came to my defense. Hey, enough already. Both of them are our precious daughters. Melissa has her strengths, and so does Juana. Juana's strengths? I have no idea where those are, though. I said, stop it. Even though my father rarely raised his voice, these exchanges became a routine part of our household. After my father passed away, we decided to let go of the family home. The house was old, built by my father's grandfather, and was in disrepair. The windows wouldn't close properly, the second floor visibly slanted to the point where a ball would roll on its own. The floors creaked with every step, and it felt like it was only a matter of time before they gave way. Everyone agreed it was difficult to continue living there without major renovations. So we concluded it was better to sell the house and use the money to secure a new home. Though the house held many memories, my father had once jokingly said, "This house has reached its limit," so I believed he would have supported our decision. At the time, my sister and her husband were living in a rented apartment, but a plan emerged to use the proceeds from the house sale and their savings to build a two-family home for everyone to live in together. My sister offered me a choice, saying, "We can divide the money from the sale, and if you want to live alone, that's fine too." But my mother insisted strongly that we should build a two-family home. Under that pressure, both my sister's family and I ended up agreeing to her suggestion. Although I felt a desire to distance myself from my mother, I also felt uncertain about living alone for the first time. As I wavered, my brother-in-law reassured me, saying, "I travel a lot for work, so it would be a relief to have you around, Juana." My sister added, "I plan to continue working too, so having you here would really help." Unsure whether their words were sincere or just polite, I still felt somewhat happy to think they needed me. Thus, I decided to move into the new house and live with them. On the other hand, my mother blatantly said things like, "Honestly, the house would feel more spacious without Juana." Well, at best, she might be useful for babysitting. However, since my sister and her husband agreed to let me live with them, my mother didn't oppose the arrangement any further. Since my brother-in-law's parents had already passed away, no one objected to my sister's family living with us, so the plan moved forward smoothly. Now I live in the new house as a single woman. It seems my mother isn't too happy with this situation. How long do you plan to keep relying on your family home? She's asked me this question multiple times, but I managed to brush it off. My mother's sarcastic remarks are so routine that taking them seriously would be endless. Besides, my sister's children are absolutely adorable. My 7-year-old niece, Sarah, and 3-year-old nephew, Sammy, call me Aunt Juana and are very attached to me. When my sister works late, I sometimes pick them up from daycare. Seeing their excited faces as they run toward me always warms my heart. This year, Sarah started elementary school, and while I miss seeing her sweet little face light up like that, I feel comforted knowing Sammy is still young, and I can enjoy these moments with him for a while longer. So, you're 38 this year? When do you plan on getting married? I don't have any plans at the moment. Do you really think you can get married with that face? Honestly, it's hopeless. Marriage isn't everything, and I'm holding down a steady job. Don't act so high and mighty just because you work at some third-rate company. I'm not acting high and mighty. I can't stand seeing someone as plain-looking as you hanging around. Honestly, I wish you'd just disappear. Do you really have to say all that? Sarah and Sammy are so adorable, taking after Melissa. But with you here, I worry your looks might somehow rub off on them. Even though my mother doesn't spend much time with her grandchildren, she brings them up just to criticize me. Honestly, I sometimes wonder if continuing to live with my sister's family at 38 is the right thing to do. Maybe I should start living on my own. While I was considering this, my sister told me she was expecting her third child. Both my sister and brother-in-law, as well as the kids, were overjoyed. A third one, huh? Though my brother-in-law, like my sister, doesn't show his emotions much, he looked genuinely happy about the news. I felt happy for them too, but my mother's snide remarks intensified as a result. You're really just aging without contributing anything, aren't you? You're just wasting time getting older. I'm not exactly causing you any trouble, am I? You can't get married or have kids. Meanwhile, Melissa is already on her third child. People like you, who just grow older without producing anything, are nothing but a nuisance. Hurry up and leave. What? Sigh. Juana, why are you so plain looking? Honestly, thinking of you as my daughter depresses me. And to still be single at 38, it's truly troubling. Troubling. What does that even mean? In contrast, Melissa is so beautiful and radiant, just like me. It's hard to believe you both came from the same mother. Maybe you were switched at birth in the hospital or something. But Dad always said I look like him. That's true. I should have been more careful when choosing a partner back then. No matter how much money he made, marrying a man who looks like that is why I ended up with such a plain daughter. Don't talk about Dad like that. Unlike you, Dad treated Melissa and me equally. Well, you and your ugly father were always close, weren't you? But unfortunately he's gone now, and there's no one left to defend you. I couldn't believe how my mother spoke so gleefully about my father's death. And as if to twist the knife further, she continued. You don't understand unless it's spelled out, do you? Not only are you ugly, but you're also dumb and inconsiderate. You don't have to say it like that. If I don't say it, you won't get it. Even Melissa always says having someone like you in the house is a nuisance. Is that true? It's the truth. The fact that you don't even realize it just proves how hopeless you are. While I didn't fully believe my mother's words, I couldn't help but wonder in the back of my mind. If my sister really felt that way, it would deeply hurt me. Although I wasn't entirely free of insecurities around my sister, I thought we had managed to maintain a comfortable distance and a good relationship. I considered asking her about it, but something held me back. Perhaps it would be better to leave quietly rather than confirm it outright. After all, this wasn't really my home anymore. It felt more like my sister and her husband's house. It was only natural for both my mother and my sister to see my prolonged stay here as inconvenient. That day, I finally resolved to leave the house. But when I returned from work, my belongings were carelessly piled by the front door. What's going on here? Since you wouldn't leave, I decided to put your stuff outside. That's awful. You didn't have to do this. Well, you clearly don't get it when I say it, so I had no choice. Looking at my scattered clothes, I felt tears welling up in my eyes. I felt pathetic and ashamed, picking up my things while wondering what I was doing with my life. At that moment, my sister arrived home with my nephew and niece. She must have picked them up from daycare and after-school care on her way back from work. Seeing me gathering my clothes, my sister looked at me coldly. What is this situation? The kids also stared at me, puzzled. My sister's gaze felt like it pierced through me, making me feel even more wretched. See, isn't it better without Juana around? She's nothing but a burden. A burden. She's already old enough, yet she can't get married, can't have kids, and works at a third-rate company. She's completely worthless. Just having her here is a waste of time and money." Hearing my mother's words, my sister turned her eyes toward me. Suddenly, my niece came over and started helping me pick up my clothes. "Aunt Juana." "What are you doing, Sarah? You don't need to do that." "Stop it. Pretty girls don't do things like that. Leave the garbage picking to the ugly ones." Despite the presence of my niece and nephew, I was on the verge of tears. "Are you okay?" "I see. So that's how it is." My sister watched the scene unfold with a stern expression. Her silence made me wonder if she, too, saw me in this light. The thought made me feel even more miserable. I bit my lip in regret, thinking I should have left the house much earlier. "Melissa, you feel the same way, don't you? I'm not needed in this family, am I? If people without productivity aren't needed, then I feel the same way," my sister said. Hearing her words, my mother reacted with delight. I struggled to hold back the tears that were threatening to spill. I felt that crying now would only make me feel even more pathetic. Exactly. Anyone wasting money should leave. Someone wasting money, huh? Then why don't you leave, Mom? What? Even my mother was shocked, and for a moment I couldn't understand what my sister had said. I thought I must have misheard her and found myself staring at my sister's face. She met my eyes and smiled warmly. It was clear she had meant exactly what she said. My mother looked bewildered, seemingly even more confused by my sister's words than I was. "Mom, didn't you hear me? Wait a minute, what are you saying?" "It's supposed to be Juana who leaves." My sister calmly set Sammy down from her arms. Then she looked at Sarah and asked her to take Sammy to their room. Sarah nodded with a sweet smile. "Come on, Sammy, let's go." She cheerfully took his hand and led him into the house. After watching them leave, my sister spoke. "You said it yourself, Mom. People without productivity should leave. That describes you, doesn't it? Are you joking? I'm your mother. I gave birth to you. And what are you doing now? Wasting money, just eating and sleeping. Where's the productivity in that?" My sister's words left my mother wide-eyed with shock. She looked almost cartoonish, her eyes bulging as if they might pop out. "You don't help take care of the kids, you don't assist with picking them up from daycare, and you don't do any housework. All of that has been done by Juana. Without her, I would have been completely lost." "Sis, that's just because she's a freeloader, isn't it?" "Mom, you're a freeloader too. Juana pays her share of living expenses every month, but you use all your pension on yourself and don't contribute to utilities or groceries. I'm your parent. It's the children's responsibility to take care of their parents. And besides, the money to build this house came from selling your father's house. That gives me the right to live here. It's useless to argue that. When we sold the family home, you claimed half as your inheritance. But this house was built entirely with the rest of the inheritance and my savings. Juana's rightful share was also used for this house, which gives her the right to live here. You, Mom, who didn't put in a single cent, don't have that right." "What?" Indeed, when the family home was sold, there had been a discussion about dividing the inheritance. But I had assumed the money was used to build the new house. At the time, my sister had offered to give me my share, but I chose not to take it, thinking it was better used for the house. It seemed natural to me, and I had assumed my mother thought the same. After all, she had been so adamant about building a two-family home. That's right. Dad's inheritance was divided, with half going to Mom and the rest split between Juana and me. So, half of it is mine. But Mom, this house was built with the remaining inheritance and our savings. That includes the share Juana should have received. So Juana has every right to live here. You, who didn't contribute a single dollar, don't." "What?" "Mom, you claimed the entire inheritance as your share and didn't contribute to building this house. That means you have no right to live here. So, shouldn't it be you who leaves?" It seemed my sister's words finally sank in, as my mother's face gradually turned pale. She never imagined my sister would say something like this. My mother had always cherished my sister, firmly believing she would always take her side no matter what. To be honest, I was just as surprised as my mother to hear my sister speak this way. But upon reflection, it felt very much like something my sister would do. Since childhood, she had always approached things objectively, without letting emotions cloud her judgment. Her expressions rarely betrayed her feelings, making her emotions difficult to read, but she always made logical decisions. I remember hearing about how, as a middle schooler, she witnessed bullying and used her reasoning skills to thoroughly defeat the bully in an argument. People around her sometimes described her as cold and calculating. Even so, I had always been proud of her. Seeing her unchanged after all these years, I felt a deep sense of admiration. What? Are you planning to kick your own mother out? Have you forgotten everything I've done for you? Everything you've done? All you ever did was parade me around to show off. I was nothing more than a tool for your self-satisfaction. Hearing my sister's words, I realized she, too, had been harboring deep feelings about our mother. I used to envy how my sister always went out with our mother, but she had never seemed to enjoy herself. It wasn't that our mother adored her to our mother, my sister was simply a trophy to flaunt. Even so, I've kept quiet because you're our mother. But Juana is also my beloved sister, and she's family. I believe family members should support each other. Hearing my sister's words warmed my heart, and I felt tears welling up. Knowing my sister thought of me this way filled me with joy. She truly was someone I could be proud of. Besides, Sarah is in elementary school now and understands more than you think. Having someone like you around would only have a negative impact on her, so you need to leave. What? Are you serious? Yes, I've reached my limit. It's not good for me or the baby to keep enduring this. Where am I supposed to go? My sister cast a single glance at my mother and walked past her without a word. My mother sank to the floor. As I quietly tried to pass her, she suddenly grabbed my leg. Even you're abandoning me? Who do you think raised you to this point? You're not. What? You're not my parent. My only parent was Dad. With that, I walked into the house. My mother stared at our backs in stunned silence. Later, my mother tried to speak to my sister in a gentler tone, but my sister completely ignored her, acting as though she didn't even exist. Eventually, my sister told the kids, "Grandma is leaving." Yay. That's great. What? Well, Grandma was always mean to Aunt Juana. I didn't like her. Sarah said this cheerfully, laughing. Hearing her words, my mother seemed even more frozen in place. Children are incredibly perceptive, I thought once again. Afterward, my mother began living alone in a small, run-down apartment behind the train station. My sister quickly found an apartment and moved my mother's belongings out in no time. I was impressed by her swift and decisive actions. However, my sister is the one paying for the rent of that apartment. You would think my mother would at least be grateful for that, but she doesn't seem to feel any gratitude at all. Apparently, over the past 7 years, my mother had spent all the money from the sale of the house. I had felt something was off about her lavish lifestyle, wondering if my sister was giving her some financial support. But that wasn't the case. She probably thought she could spend her savings freely because my sister was covering her living expenses. She had racked up considerable credit card debt, so her monthly payments were quite significant. Most of her pension went toward paying off those debts, leaving her in a tough financial spot. She had asked my sister multiple times to let her move back, but my sister refused. She even called me asking to borrow money, but I, of course, declined. Since then, I stopped communicating with her. One day, I spotted my mother working part-time at a supermarket. When she noticed me, she approached and demanded money. Seeing her still energetic reassured me in a strange way. It seemed she wasn't well liked at her part-time job due to her bossy attitude, and she lived a quiet life in her apartment with no friends visiting her. That was likely the last time I would see her. 2 years later, I got married and moved out. Afterward, my sister and her husband gave me the full amount of money from the sale of our father's house. My sister explained that they had saved it so they could return my share when I got married. Initially, I said I didn't need it since I had relied on their home for so long. But my sister insisted, saying that because I had always contributed to household expenses, I deserved to have the money back. Once again, I felt so grateful to have such an amazing sister. A year later, I gave birth to twin daughters. I remained close with my sister and her family. Her third child was a boy. Her 3 kids adored my twins as if they were their own little sisters. I truly hope we can continue to maintain this loving and close relationship for many years to come.